Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 251. My name is NBZ, and you know, Bala, you can tell that everything is back in order because Nintendo decided once again to screw us over with our recording schedule and put a Nintendo Direct 2 weeks ago, right after we dropped our last episode.
Well, it's not like
the balance is back.
It's not like coverage of the Nintendo Direct would have easily have fit into episode 250, which was
true.
Another marathon episode. So thank you for everyone for listening and bearing with us while we put that out into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of which, usually what happens when we get those big episodes out, as well as big games coming out like Tears of the Kingdom, is we'll have some new listeners come to the show, and people might have jumped in on those episodes and might be wondering, hey, what is this show really? Who are these people? What do they do? And what's going on? So, Bally, maybe we'll just, for some new listeners out there, talk about what this show is, because we haven't really done that much, and it's a good thing to kind of frame. So, Bally, do you want to let us know, what is this Nintendo Life?
What is this show? We are a Nintendo-focused podcast that comes out every 2 weeks. We also have a Patreon show once a month. And I would say our unique selling point is that we have known each other an incredibly long time. So I'm now 32. I think you're 31. And we've both known each other since we were 5.
I think I was 4 probably when I met you.
You were 4. That would make sense. Yeah. And for most of that time, we've been playing games. And November 2013, we decided to start a podcast because we listened to a lot of video game podcasts at the time. And we thought that'd be a fun thing to try and do. So we started, and I guess MBZ's got a big background in the Pokemon YouTube space. I have a very small background in the Pokemon
You
YouTube
do have
space.
a background, though. You can't say that.
I do have a background. And yeah, we just decided to start this little podcast, and have gradually grown a community that mainly lives on Discord.
Yes.
Definitely check that out in the show notes. And I think that's a decent description. Anything else to add, MZ?
Yeah, so we used to say a thing where we do like 3 segments, and we cut them up into stuff like listener mail, what we've been playing, sometimes industry news, that sort of stuff. We kind of cut that down to 2 segments because we realized that we spend a lot of time talking about what we've been playing, and we like that part quite a lot. So we kind of split it up. So it's now a 2-segment show. So usually we talk about what we've been playing to begin with, and then we talk about some other stuff, either emails from listeners, which you can send in, of course, to our show, or we go into some news, stuff like Nintendo Directs, and sometimes we flip it around, which may be what we're doing today. So, Bally, with all that set up, do you want to let the folks at home know what today's show is going to look like?
For today's show, the first segment, we're going to be talking about all the things we thought were exciting from that Nintendo Direct, and then for the second segment, we are going to talk about the games that we have been playing.
Absolutely. There's lots of fun stuff going on. But yes, Nintendo, in their infinite wisdom, decided right after we did our big old episode 250, hey, let's just drop a Nintendo Direct on these boys. How about that? See how that happens.
I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was coming anytime soon. I was thinking September, October, maybe. I wasn't even guaranteed for then, because I thought they might be like, right, Tears of the Kingdom is out. We're going to take the rest of 2023 off. See you guys later. Bye. Have a good one.
Yeah, not quite apparently, because they had a lot to show and a lot to talk about, and it was an interesting Nintendo Direct in a lot of different ways. But yeah, I agree with you. I think there was rumblings going around, and I was like, this always happens. Like the thing is, the problem with Nintendo Direct is like literally every 2 weeks they'll suddenly be like hashtag Nintendo Direct on my Twitter, and I click through it and I'm like, it's just people just thirsting again and again. Like that's all that happens, is I see that hashtag constantly pop up, and yeah, I think because we had kind of decided like we're not in the Summer Game Fest period anymore, like it's kind of almost come to an end, and Nintendo generally likes to be on their own and important, and you know, taking control of the messaging and all that sort of stuff. Thought like the opportunity's passed now, they're not going to do it, they're going to wait until September. But then they decided, hey, we will round out this triumvirate, and even though Sony started back at like I think in May, and Microsoft did their regular time, and Nintendo did it a little bit later, still within a month and a half period we did have all 3 companies doing it, which I think is kind of the closest it's been in the last few years when it comes down to it, which that's kind of neat, I think, even though it's not the same as the old days.
I'd love it within the space of a week, but you know, the world's not perfect, and I thought the overall 3 interesting presentations.
So let's do top thoughts, Bally. What did you think about this Nintendo Direct?
I think the highs were very high, and then the lows were kind of low. There was quite a lot of just kind of, I don't know, ports.
A lot of fluff in there, right?
Fluff. you kind of notice the downside of going third out of the three main companies is that there's kind of like a lot of games coming cross-platform that we've already seen in multiple places, and then Nintendo decides to show them off. Some ports of some very old games, but then the highs were just really, really high. Like I said, I think in a year where Tears of the Kingdom has already come out, we know Pikmin 4 is coming. I think to throw in two more from a Nintendo perspective, big games after that is making 2023 just a stellar year for Nintendo. And it was already a great year, and they might have just turned it into a stellar one. And I think that deserves a lot of credit. I think it was a very strong direct.
Yeah, totally. I think I liked it a lot. From my perspective, it did really feel like an end of life direct. It felt like, okay, we're running on fumes now. The Switch is pretty old. We don't have a huge amount of mega things, but like, here are some holes in our lineup that haven't been done on the Switch. Let's just plug those before we leave it and move on to the next system. Definitely felt like, all right, we're just going to do a few more of these things, and then next year is when probably we're going to start hearing about another Nintendo platform. And I don't know, I feel like the next actual Nintendo Direct that happens, maybe one that happens in September or near the end of this year, I feel like that's when we're going to really feel the dregs of stuff like ports, and they'll be like, the headline of that Direct will likely be stuff like the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports that people have been saying have been real for years, and are not actually.
When does the next Switch come? Did this Direct change your opinion on that timeline?
A little, yeah. It made me think that they would announce it like start of next year as opposed to like end of next year.
And then comes out end of next year, or comes out 25?
Yeah, I think end of next year potentially. The only thing going against that is Nintendo's insistence on wanting to basically be the best-selling console of all time, and they can achieve that if they just,
you think they really care about that?
I think they care about it to a degree, yeah. I think that there is still life in Switch, right? And we talked about this a lot, but I feel like there's still games coming out for it. We've been playing the Pikmin 4 demo, we'll talk about that in the whole announcement, but like playing that game, I'm like, I didn't really need a more powerful piece of hardware for this, right? Like it runs great, looks great, it's perfectly fine. So I think from Nintendo's perspective, they look at games like that and they're like, we can keep making stuff that looks like this, and people will still buy it, right? Like the system is still selling very well. So I don't know. We'll see. But I do think that what you were saying is correct in that the beginning of this presentation, the first few announcements, I was like, is this going to be one of the worst Nintendo Directs of all time? Because this is just like ticking off things that already got announced 3 weeks ago at Summer Game Fest for other platforms. But for Nintendo, they have contractual obligations to say, yes, Sonic is coming to Switch. Yes, Persona's coming to Switch. Here's Myth Force. Here's like these things that are contractually obligated because their partners have said, we're going to do these. And we just kind of have to put out a presentation in order to do that. And my fear was, this was going to be pretty flaccid because of that. But they surprised us in that they did have some big fun announcements to go alongside all the things that they quote unquote had to talk about. So yeah, I think it was really cool, and there's definitely some big highlights, some big standouts. But Bally, where do you want to start with this thing? We got some things highlighted that we want to dive into, but what stands out?
Let's go big. So
let's go big.
Before the Direct, there was the rumor from quite a good reputable resource, I can't remember who it was, saying
it was a leaker on Twitter. Basically, it was someone on Twitter who had been proven correct in leaking a couple of different things, and they tweeted a cryptic tweet, was like, I wonder what it's going to be, and then they were like, there will be a new 2D Mario, there will be a Super Nintendo remake. That was what they tweeted, basically.
So I think those were the two big ones. So then when they dropped Super Mario RPG, which is definitely not the Super Nintendo remake I would have guessed. I think people were pointing out like, oh, could this be Earthbound? Is this I think F-Zero was in there as well.
Chrono Trigger, for sure.
Chrono Trigger. I would have definitely bet more on Chrono Trigger. Like,
there were a lot of people in the Fire Emblem community who were setting up their live streams for Nintendo Direct, and you could look at all the thumbnails, and they were all like, "Genealogy, it is time! FE4 remake!" Like, there were all the Fire Emblem people saying, because it's been a rumor for a long time that they're going to remake the Super Nintendo Fire Emblem that never came out in the West. So my opinion was actually, oh, that's probably quite likely. So I thought that was going to be the remake, but I guess not. Wasn't the case.
I mean, Super Mario RPG, I think what's weird about it is, knowing what I know about Nintendo, I would have assumed they thought it is like the ugly duckling that they don't want to bring back from history.
Right.
You know, like it's like the weird. People just say that game is weird, but it's still very good. Like it gets incredibly. People love that game for sure.
Also, because of all the Twitter stuff with Smash Brothers, where sickos on the internet are just harassing Sakurai about Geno every 5 seconds,
God, yeah.
You would think that they just wouldn't want to get into it anymore. You know, like there's a lot of like meta level stuff tied up with Geno as a character in the most last 5 years or so, I would say. But
right.
But I think the thing is, the game itself is revered, right? Like, it was super well reviewed at the time. It was the first time that Nintendo had done a collaboration with one of their main IP and let another company make the game, because Super Mario RPG was made by Square Enix. Nintendo didn't have development involvement. I mean, I'm sure they had oversight.
Well, it was made by Squaresoft, actually.
That's correct, yeah. Squaresoft before the merger, before that happened. So, yes, it was a Square game back then. And so, yeah, this is really interesting, because I'm not sure who's making it. We can maybe speculate on that based on some things we saw, but yeah, it's this is a bit of, not a licensing nightmare, but there's weird like Final Fantasy stuff in Super Mario RPG. There's this whole super secret boss that is basically a Final Fantasy final boss that's in this game. Cool. Lots of weird characters that Square obviously invented, and Nintendo let them do that. But yeah, there's some weird legal stuff going on with this game, and them managing to pull it off and make it happen is very cool. So yeah,
what's weird, and from what I've seen, it's kind of looking like it might have got the Link's Awakening treatment. And what I mean by that is, this is actually a remaster with a very shiny coat of paint.
Yes, fundamentally the same game system.
Fundamentally the same game, but looks very pretty. I don't know if you would agree or have seen anything that goes against that.
Yeah, no, I think that is probably correct. The only thing I would speculate that they could have changed is stuff that has happened with other remasters of this ilk. A lot of older JRPGs that get the modern treatment get stuff like, here's ×2 speed, here's like the difficulty accessibility options, infinite health, all that sort of stuff. That tends to be the case for all the Final Fantasy games that got remastered. This feels like it's a step above those in that it's fully redoing the visual style, because it's not just an HD upgrade, because it was originally a weird kind of 3D pixel hybrid. It's using the kind of Mode 7 Donkey Kong Country Super Nintendo style thing of the past. This is a full-blown, they made a brand new thing not mechanically, visually, versus those Final Fantasy remasters, like Final Fantasy 7 on Switch, for example, is just a HDified version. It still looks like a PS1 game, right? Fundamentally.
Right.
And that's why they add stuff like all the speed up. And I would love them to add that sort of stuff to this game, but it being Nintendo makes me skeptical that they will do that, given what they did with Link's Awakening, right? It's unlikely it's going to be that. So I do side with you in the sense that, yeah, it likely will just be the same. The thing I could see them doing is changing or adding difficulty options, or making it easier potentially for newer players, because there's definitely some challenge to this. And like some of the older Mario RPG games, like the GBA Mario and Luigi games, are quite challenging. I remember I was stuck on the final boss of Partners in Time for so many years, like for so long, and when I finally beat it, it was like a battle that took me like 2.5 hours. It was probably the longest final boss I've ever done in my life. I just remember sitting there in front of the TV when I was like, I don't know, 14 or something, and like just fucking smashing away at this final boss of Partners in Time. It was a nightmare. So those games can get hard, is what I'm saying. They can get challenging, and especially back then when they weren't as balanced or lent towards more casual players as they are today. But yeah, what do you think of the new visual style, Bala? Because we have intended for a long time to play Super Mario RPG. It's kind of a backlog club we've had promised for a while, and obviously it's much harder to do backlog clubs these days. But it's it's a good way to jump back into or play it for the first time.
We're gonna fulfill our promise. We're gonna do it.
I
like the art style. I think, would I describe the original game now as good looking? I'd probably go like, I don't know. I don't love the original art style. It's weird, and I certainly prefer the look of a game like, I don't know, Donkey Kong Country. I think that game's maybe aged a little better in terms of that art style. So I like the new look. It's much cleaner. It just fits in with kind of the modern Mario look, and we can get to that with maybe Wonder a bit. But I think it's cleaned up and looks nice. It's nothing special. Maybe just a little bit too clean, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't know if you notice the UI elements of like when they're attacking or when they get hit, or some of the menus of them. But to me, it looks very Mario Party, and I don't know how to feel about that. Like, is ND Cube working on this game? Not that that's a concern, because they are just kind of remaking a game that already exists, but I looked at the UI and I was like, this looks really cheap and bad in a Mario Party-esque way. And I don't know, it's a minor thing, but stuff like that can grate on people, especially when you look at like the Final Fantasy pixel remasters that Square Enix did, and all the font choices on the original Steam release were so terrible that people modded in actual fonts that people wanted into the game, like readable, nice looking fonts. It's a thing that kind of can turn people off quite easily, and I don't think we saw enough of it for people to get riled, but it was the one thing that when I was watching it, I was like, oh, this feels a little less important or premium. It feels like a little cheaper for having that Mario Party-esque kind of like numbers popping up and stuff like that, right? Like I didn't love that, but the approach they've taken from a one-to-one visual standpoint, like Mario's a short, stubby little boy. Like, I like how squashed he is, and I like how they've kept that squashed look for almost every character. And you compare, there were people doing Twitter screenshot comparisons of some of the weird enemies, and like, yeah, they really transferred all these super weird enemies over to this new style and kept the fundamental visual design of all of them.
Yeah. Did you see the box art?
Yeah, I did see that as well. Yeah, which was pretty much identical almost.
It seems like a hilarious box art for 2023. So for those who don't know, it's kind of taking the original box art, it's basically all the characters from the game, or the main characters from the game, just there
standing on a white background.
On the white background, standing out, and then the new box art is just those characters up-resed on a white background, facing out, in just a very stark way that I just thought was very funny. I really appreciate that.
It's weird as well, because the only character missing is Yoshi. Yoshi's in the original, but he wasn't shown in any footage here. I wonder if that, I don't know if that means anything, but it was a little off that he wasn't present. So I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, from what I know, I believe I watched a full playthrough of this game. It's been so long now. You know, I watched playthroughs of most games, old Nintendo games back in the day. So I have seen Mario RPG all the way through. So I'm familiar with Mallow and Gino, all that sort of stuff. And but I don't really remember any of it. So it will feel, I think, quite fresh going into it this time, which is good. And supposedly the writing is very sharp, and it's kind of the origin of that comedic tone that the Mario and Luigi and then Paper Mario games would subsequently take on as part of their identity. But it all began here with the original Super Mario RPG, and I don't know, this definitely feels like, hey, I wonder if this opens the door to them doing another one, right? Like, is this a backdoor into getting that series back onto Nintendo hardware in the future? Do they go back to Square Enix and say, let's partner up again, do a brand new Super Mario RPG?
Let's actually put some RPG mechanics in our next Paper Mario?
No, that's definitely not going to happen, but they could do a Mario RPG 2. I think that is definitely likely. Yeah. Cool. Let's go from one Mario to the other, because we have to talk about Super Mario Wonder.
Super Mario Brothers Wonder.
Sorry, yeah, for fuck's sake. It really annoys me. And you are correct, absolutely. To give it its true proper, the Super Mario Brothers Wonder game, as Nintendo would say.
Wait, is that the new one or the old one?
What do you mean?
I thought this was a new Super Mario Brothers game.
It's not. No, it is not.
But it's the latest one. Is it not new?
That's true. It is a new Super Mario Brothers game.
No, it's not. It's not a new Super Mario Brothers game. It's a new Super Mario Brothers game.
It's a new Super Mario Brothers game, not a new Super Mario Brothers game.
God,
of course.
Get it right.
How could you get confused at any of this at all? Can I just say that thank fucking God we are done with new Super Mario Brothers. I am elated in so many ways. That said, like, there you can see a bit of lineage.
You can see the bones.
Right?
The bones
you
are there.
You can see it. So, what is this? This is a brand new 2D side-scrolling Mario game, probably in our top 3 list of things that we have shouted about wanting on the podcast for the last 10 years, basically, I would say, is like, where is a new 2D Mario with a unique art style, right? That's kind of been our MO, is like, I think one of us predicts it every year of some kind, right? And I can't even remember if either of us predicted it this year, but hey, it's happening this year. And I will say, it doesn't go as far as I personally would have expected. You know, when we talk about that sort of stuff, I'm always talking about stuff like Kirby's Canvas Curse, Rainbow Curse with a clay art style, or Yoshi's Woolly World with the like crafty stuff, like Nintendo taking an aesthetic and applying it to their 2D platformers. That's kind of what I expected here. And what they've done instead is they've taken the bones of New Super Mario Brothers, but given it actual personality, right? Like, they've actually looked at Mario and his design and gone from the ground up and said, we can afford to be a little weird here, right? We can make him a more cartoonish, more expressive, and like just build a lot more character into his movement and his facial expressions and all that sort of stuff. And I think they did a stellar job at it. Like, I think this game looks fantastic in a lot of different ways, but I think fundamentally the shift to a more characterful Mario just makes me more confident in this than almost anything else, really.
Yeah.
It's surprising how much of a big deal it is.
No, totally agree. And like, in our ideal world, this would be even bigger and even bolder, especially in terms of that art style. But, you know, this is Nintendo. They're obviously very conservative with their most prized possession in Mario. And you need to remember, like, generally speaking, 2D Mario sells so much more than 3D Mario. Like, this game is going to do absolute gangbusters. And if they want to stick to the bones of New Super Mario Brothers and then just change the art style slightly, well, it's actually quite radical. Like, I think you are right.
It's pretty radical when you do like side-by-side image comparisons.
Totally.
Yeah.
You realize, looking at those side-by-side comparisons, that the original New Super Mario Brothers, when you zoom in on Mario, he is so dead and lifeless. Like, he is the lack of like personality and character in that character is crazy compared to like what they've done. It's almost like it looks a bit like they've kind of twisted him a little bit to face the screen more, so you're getting a lot more full face frontal Mario than you might have otherwise been hoping for. And
it's more like Super Mario World or the classics Mario games.
Yeah,
right,
totally. And it looks really good. And you're right, the animation is just great. And they're doing really cool, innovative things with the levels. And it's weird and it's wild. And it's exactly what we wanted. And we were really like questioning, where do they go after Mario Maker? And like, I think this is a really strong direction. And I could be happier because it could be bigger and bolder, but for Nintendo, it's very big and bold. I'm very excited, and it's very controversial that it's coming out on the same day as Spider-Man 2.
Yes,
so
absolutely. Got to make some hard choices there. I know what I'll be playing. Both of them simultaneously with two different hands.
I'm going to go for both. I can do it.
But the thing with this game, right, is I think from a design perspective, when you look at it, when you consider like what they could have done and what the new Super Mario Brothers games have been, it is a bold mechanical direction as well, in the sense that they have this new idea, right? These wonder flowers that you collect, and basically, you know, if they had been mushrooms, I think Nintendo would have gotten more trouble, because basically Mario's just getting high in this game, essentially, is what's happening. Weird stuff is going on in the background, pipes are moving, shadows are being turned, Mario's being long. It's not just long Mario and Mario Maker anymore, he's now actual long Mario, and you can run around as him. He's turning into a crazy wrecking ball with spikes protruding. There is a creativity here that I have not seen in the 2D games, I guess, since like the Super Nintendo, right? Like Super Mario World is actually a surprisingly really creative game, and I think that game has a lot of cool stuff going on.
I was going to say, I've not seen zaniness like that since Wario Land.
Yeah.
And I'd even throw in, what's the Get Fuzzy, Get Dizzy level from Yoshi's Island?
Yeah,
like, that level of just strange, innovative, cool 2D platforming.
Mm-hmm. It honestly does feel like the Odyssey team came over to the new Super Mario Brothers team and were like, you motherfuckers, you don't know what to do, let us fix this for you. And they went in there and they fixed it, basically.
The existing team was like, right, we've got this template, it's called New Super Mario Brothers 5, and it looks like this. We've got all the template is ready to go. We've designed these very bog standard levels. We think it's going to sell gangbusters. Are you happy with that? And they've just taken a big old eraser and rubbed out all of that and slightly changed this and massively changed that, and it's looking great.
Yeah, I think this is the thing that excites me the most, is that they feel like we are going to get a bunch of levels that every time you go through them, they're going to be brand new ideas that are not going to be things that you see again, right? Like that, and I worry that it falls into more of a Kirby Forgotten Land thing, where they kind of run out of stuff, because that can happen in these kind of older New Super Mario Brothers games.
But they'll still feel the need to make it a 12-hour game, and then the last 4 hours are use this item again, do this again. Yeah, that's definitely a fear. A
slight concern, but I do have confidence given how little we've seen so far, and yet how much variety and flair and weirdness there is. Like, I mean, just like one of the best stingers in a trailer of all time. When Mario turned into an elephant, I lost my fucking mind. Like,
so good.
What are they doing? It's so good. And it just gets you thinking, like, we're going to have Giraffe Mario? What's going on? Is he going to the zoo?
We're going to face off against Elephant Bowser, final boss.
I think that has to happen, right? Like, that makes sense.
Happen.
It's what's happened with Cat Mario in the past. And
exactly.
I don't know, is Elephant Mario the only weird different kind of power-up that we see in this game, Bally? Do you think there are more, or do you think this is a Cat Mario situation where the whole game is built around it?
Elephant Mario has already been confirmed for the sequel to the Super Mario Brothers movie. It's going to be a major part of that film, guaranteed.
I see. That's good. It's good to know. I'm down with it.
I think we're going to get like underwater octopus Mario or something wild.
Okay,
like, here we go. Let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what do underwater levels look like in this game? That's fascinating to think about. But yeah, we have always been on this podcast, like, 2D Mario is cool, but we're not really fans of it. And the only ones that we really like are stuff like, the classic Game Boy Mario Land 2 or Mario Maker, which I think the reason I like Mario Maker is that it's not very Mario, because the levels you can make are like Metroid levels and like other stuff, puzzle levels, like stuff that is not what you would ever see in a traditional Mario game.
And we like the Donkey Kong games, Wario Land. I really like Yoshi's Island, which is technically a Mario game, I guess.
Yeah, technically, but like I think traditional side-scrolling 2D Mario has never been on my list, and like looking at this game and the potential that it has, like this could be, next time we do a top 50, Bally, this could definitely be a contender, and I'm very, very excited, and hopefully it will turn out great.
What is your prediction right now? Will this game make it into the top 50 next time for episode 300?
I'm going to be positive and say yes. Yeah, I think it will.
Do you think it'll be in the 40s, the 30s?
I don't know. I can't predict that far in the future. My brain will melt down otherwise.
I think it'll sneak in at the bottom as well.
Yeah, I think this game will be really, really good, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think, surprise and impact is always one of the most important factors for me for new stuff. So this already has that in spades, and I just want more of it. So very excited to play that come October. But yeah, I think those are two of the headlining acts here, Bally. But
there's definitely a dip after those two announcements. But there's a few more things we can talk about.
What do you want to pick out from the rest of these?
It's nice that there's another WarioWare game.
Yeah, that's true.
We were both pretty lukewarm, to the point of I don't even think it scraped into our top 10 last year. Was it last year? Get It Together was just, and like having an individual character that interacts with the game within the game, if that makes sense. Like, it was a bold take with Get It Together. So WarioWare Move It sounds like it's going back to the kind of Wiimote style. Take the Joy-Con and do crazy shit with it, and maybe they should have done that with the first game on Switch, but who's to say? I might be a little bit WarioWared out by that last game. I'm not sure. This year is an incredibly busy year to play games, and I need WarioWare Move It to do some seriously cool things in reviews and see some people loving that game before I think I'm going to jump, because I don't know. I'm a little like, show me a Wiimote or, 1-2, everyone 1-2 Switch. I'm a little bit old for that now. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure that it's going to work for me.
We got back pain, man. I can't stand up, for a long period of time. It's rough. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, I think if we were 10-year-olds, this would be top of our list for Christmas, right? Absolutely. And we'd be playing it multiplayer nonstop. But even WarioWare, it's not Shake It, because that's the platformer.
Awful name.
Smooth Moves.
Smooth Moves. That's the Wii one.
On Wii.
Yes.
Even WarioWare Smooth Moves. Here's what happened with that game. Ali T came round to my house. It was me, my sister, and Ali T. We played through the entire campaign of that game in an afternoon, and I don't think I went back to it aside from the couple of times you came over. And
we played a little bit of multiplayer, but it was a big drop off.
I barely played that game, and I think that there is a gimmick nature to it, but also there's something about having to stand up and do WarioWare that I'm like, WarioWare is a game that can be like so casual, one button sit down focus, and that's why the original is so good, and stuff like Twisted and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, the three that we love are Touched, that we both played a ton of on DS. I think it was a launch game as well. Like,
it was
fantastic game to launch. The GameCube version I played a ton of, especially at uni, and that was a multiplayer version of the original Game Boy Advance game, which is fantastic. And then obviously Twisted on Game Boy Advance, which I got in the States because it wasn't in Europe, and that is also a fantastic game that has to come to Nintendo Switch Online soon. Like, that game is so good. And then other than those, definitely all the others have kind of dropped off big time, including Smooth Moves.
Yeah, Smooth Moves was neat, and I liked, the one that I always remember is the Wind Waker flying one where you put it over your head, stuff like that.
9 Volts games are still just the best parts of those games.
Yeah, sure. When you see like the Mario slide with a guy holding his arms out in this one, I'm like, that's why Warioware's cool.
I guess I have to get it and give that a go.
Yeah. But, I don't know, like, it's one of those games in about 7 years when the Switch eShop inevitably is going away, I'll be like, I guess I'll buy that, Like, I'll play it eventually.
Judging by how many 3DS games you just bought, I think you're definitely going to buy this game.
Oh, I will at some point. Yeah, I'll own it. And, I'm sure I'll have a good time with it. I think it looks pretty fun, and my only concern is, like, Joy-Con motion is just not quite... Like, it's advanced in some ways, but there is drawbacks to what the Wii had in terms of its IR sensor being able to recenter you constantly, and not having that with the Joy-Cons has made a bunch of motion games just less desirable to pick up and play, because you're constantly having to readjust things, right, and put your thing back in place.
I've found the motion on Joy-Cons really good, personally, like, especially with Nintendo Switch Sports. I thought that it was very good, but
it was okay. I did find that in long sessions I did have to reset it a bunch. I think that's it's just annoying, just recentering it and just keeping on clicking the stick to put it in the right position to make it, because the precision is important in that game. I think it just, for me, it always, maybe it's a problem with my Joy-Cons, I don't know, every Joy-Con has problems, but
that's another reason I just want the next Switch, is get away from these damn things.
Oh boy, well, I'll get into it when I talk about the Switch OLED next segment, but I've got some things to say.
Oh god,
I have some things to say.
They doesn't sound positive.
Actually, they're not. Okay. But look, WarioWare Move It. It's another WarioWare game. I just didn't expect it. Like, the last one came out so recently that I'm like, we're doing another. And this is another thing that feeds into this is really an end of life kind of direct, because you're like, oh, Nintendo, what do you have? Oh, I don't know. We just made another WarioWare. It's kind of the same as the Wii one. I don't think too much about it.
Family games where you swing your arms.
Yeah, totally. But it'll I'm sure be a fun kind of party thing for a lot of people. So, shout out to WarioWare Move It. But they had a bit of a rock block of Mario at the start of this thing, and one of the things they showed,
like, he had a successful film this year or something.
Yeah, it's like they need to capitalize on this guy Mario. He seems to be pretty cool. One of the things they did where they're like, anyway, Mario's not the only one getting game. Here's this, and they're like, go to a weird, like, like a curtain screen, and the curtain parts, and there's Princess Peach, and she's just on a stage, and she's run around, and she uses magic on an enemy, then she goes into a door, and then she stands on a platform, and the narrator's like, I wonder what will happen in this platform, and then nothing. No date, no name for this game. They were just like, anyway, we're working on a Princess Peach game, here's about 30 seconds of it, that's all you get. Really bizarre announcement. Like, only Nintendo gets away with announcements like this, but like, what? Why? Like, why?
What's the development cycle of this game? Has this been fast-tracked because of the film or something? Like, I'm super skeptical when they just go, Untitled Princess Peach game, I think it is actually coming out next year.
It's coming next year, isn't it? Yeah.
Right, but what's the fastest they can pump out a game like that? I don't know.
It does feel like, hey, people liked the more active Princess Peach in the Mario movie, right? Let's capitalize on that by making a Princess Peach game. Cool.
She didn't really need Mario's help in the end, did she?
She didn't. She never does. Look, I mean, even in Super Mario Odyssey, right? She's like, fuck you, bozos, I'm going off to travel the world, right? Yeah. So, the Peach has had that bent for a little bit in Nintendo's games, but it's the thing is, like, they did make a Princess Peach game in the past, Super Princess Peach, on DS, which people were not that down with. I think, like, it had a lot of problems, let's say, with the idea of all of her powers were her emotions and that sort of stuff, but I don't know, it seems like a neat platformer from a mechanical perspective, so I do want to give that a shot at some point in time, but this seems different. I don't even know if this is a platformer, right? Like, it doesn't seem like there's any jumping going on.
I'd be shocked if it wasn't a platformer, but do you have faith that Nintendo won't do something horrendously sexist?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it seems like when they cut from that end of the screen to white, it looked like she was changing her dress. So it's like all her powers, her dresses now. Like, is that the thing they're gonna do?
I mean, dresses are better than emotions. I'll
it
give them
definitely
that.
is.
That's definitely an upgrade from.
Yeah, for
from
sure.
that.
Like, there's a stylish nature to that. I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Okay.
But
that's okay.
I feel like. What's the likelihood of a flub here? I think high. Like, will it be egregious? I don't think so, but I think Nintendo will have a flub of some kind.
Is it sexist alone, the fact that Peach doesn't get the Mario Odyssey team? She gets some other
I don't
Nintendo
know who's
backroom
this,
team,
right?
you know?
Yeah, nobody knows. I don't know.
Business Unit 10 or something,
yeah,
you know?
Mm-hmm, yeah. It looked nice. Is what I'll say. Like, it looked pretty. I was into the visual style. I think it's a little bit more distinct and somewhat different. And this idea of being on a stage, maybe, and I don't. It almost the only thing I can think is like, is it a side-scrolling beat 'em up kind of game? Like, because there's no jumping involved. She's like just using magic on enemies. Is there a weird transformation thing going on? I'm just very curious about what this is.
I think power-ups, dresses, different colored dresses is a good theory. I'm gonna go 2D platformer.
Okay, yeah, I think that's reasonable to expect given the history of, other Mario games, but I hope they do something a little bit more interesting with it, and I'll definitely pick it up, I think, right? I'm curious enough about this.
Definitely.
I think it's different and unique, and yeah,
I hope
nice.
it's not a big flop. I hope they can get a decent game out there with Peach. She's I mean, like you said, she's had one game before, and people don't really want to talk about it because it wasn't good. So the only way's up.
The only way is up. Next time, we need a Zelda game where you play as the Princess Zelda. Please, Nintendo, thank you.
Why would you want to play Zelda when Linkle exists?
It's very true. Where is our Linkle game? Please, Nintendo, give us a Linkle game. But that is never going to happen, Bally, so tell us about something that is going to happen. What else stuck out to you from this?
I thought Pikmin 4, and we can talk about the demo that we've both played in the next segment, but aside from how good that demo was, this game is looking great. It looks
looking really
like
good.
They, when we've talked about that Nintendo Juice. So last year, Nintendo Juice Award definitely went to the Splatoon 3 single player campaign. Obviously, Tears of the Kingdom has a ton of Nintendo Juice. Obviously, Super Mario Brothers Wonder is going to have a ton of Nintendo Juice. But I'll tell you what, Pikmin 4 seems busting at the seams with Nintendo Juice right now, because that was innovative, interesting, creative, exciting, and it looks like a really nice evolution of where the Pikmin series should and is apparently going. So I'm very excited by Pikmin 4.
Yeah, they showed a good amount of it, and I think there was a lot of variety there, which is exciting. And having played the demo, it feels like they're kind of doubling down on this almost dungeon style of play, where you have the overworld and there's cool stuff to find there, and there's lots of things hidden, but the kind of meat of it is diving down into these holes.
Which they had in Pikmin 2, but then they went away for Pikmin 3, and I actually really enjoyed them in Pikmin 2. It's like some of the most challenging, interesting parts of the game. And what's cool about them is that time doesn't pass while you're underground, so you don't have to... If your main criticism of Pikmin is the whole day-night cycle, stressful, get all your Pikmin back before they get eaten, like these dungeons provide a bit of downtime and time to strategize and kind of think about the world a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I really like that. Like, taking away the time pressure for a little bit is super nice, and yeah, it lets you. The nice thing is they also have like the 100% thing on the menu, so you can just be satisfied of like, have I got everything here? I have. Let's get on out of here, right? Like, it's a real nice loop. But yes, we will get more Pikmin 4 chatter after the break when we talk about it, because play that demo. The demo is very good. The next thing I wanted to talk about was Detective Pikachu. He's back. He's back in action. And I never played the original Detective Pikachu on Switch. I think it was a interesting...
And 3DS.
Sorry, on 3DS.
Oh,
is what
sorry,
I meant.
it was only on 3DS.
It was not... I don't think they did bring it to Switch, right? It wasn't ported. I wonder if they will after this releases, because obviously you can't buy it anymore on 3DS. But it was kind of a point-and-click, more narrative-focused game, which is super weird. And apparently Pikachu did have voice acting in that game as well, which I had forgotten was the case, but I thought maybe they are only doing it for the Switch game. But yeah, he did. And this is also one of those games that was announced years ago. Like, it was pre-pandemic, but it was 2019 they announced this game. And I think that was in the wake of the movie having come out. So I think the movie came out in 2019 or 2018 or something like that. And obviously the movie did super well, so they were like, hey, let's make another video game, and that's what they're doing. They're doing another Detective Pikachu, and I think the first game got like kind of middling reviews. Like, it was thought of as
Sevens-ish, I
okay.
think.
It was kind of neat, but didn't quite go the full way from a mechanical standpoint. And I have hope that they can do a bit more here. Maybe it is just iterative and they don't change too much and it's kind of the same thing. But I think it's just a bit weird, isn't it? Like a talking gruff Pikachu is not what you would expect to come out of the Pokemon Company or Nintendo at any point, and yet this is what we have now. He drinks coffee and like is kind of like grumpy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's,
I think the cool thing about this game is like being in the Pokemon universe and exploring the Pokemon universe in a different perspective, a different angle, and in my opinion, like that doesn't need to involve a talking Pikachu. Now, obviously, someone higher up has said, "Well, you gotta have Pikachu. He's the main man of Pokemon. You gotta get him in there." So maybe Pikachu helps sell this game 10 times what it would otherwise. But I don't know. They don't use Pikachu to sell, I don't know, Pokemon Snap or other spin-off games. Like I don't necessarily think it needs Pikachu leading the way and being weird and talking. But I love the idea of like just a weird look at the Pokemon universe, and it was just a very weird trailer generally, I thought.
Yeah, has quirkiness in spades, and I think a lot of people will be jumping on that, especially now that the film has come out, right? Because the first game was the basis for the film in the first place, and so they haven't had a new Detective Pikachu property since that film came out and was very successful. So I feel like this is a sleeper hit to suddenly sell 10 million copies. You blink and you're like, wait, what? Detective Pikachu 2 sold 10 million copies, right? Like, I feel like that could very easily happen, which is weird, but that's the world we live in today. Bally, what else sticks out here? We're kind of getting into a bit more of the dregs, but...
Yeah, I mean, none of these are very exciting for me personally. Interesting, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon's coming to Switch.
Yeah,
that was
remaster.
Unexpected. As you say, you can no longer access 3DS games, so maybe this is one of the knock-on effects of that.
Yeah.
It's a really good... I mean, 3 is so much better than 2, but 2 is still really good. I think we've gone back and forth on 2 or 1 being better. I think 1's got a bit more character, but 2's got more some interesting puzzles, I want to say. 2's very long.
Yeah, 2 is long. I think its drawback is that it's kind of segmented. And I hope they fix the whole like
dastardly checkpoints. Honestly,
exactly.
You have to do the entire level if you die,
right,
which is brutal.
Yeah, and I hope they fix that sort of stuff. But it's a really good game still. Like there's still some really great stuff going on there, and I think this really was the Mario Direct, right? Like you have multiple Mario games being announced plus a WarioWare game. Like that's basically the kind of theme for this thing, and obviously 3DS games coming back is something that they can potentially lean on for the future of Switch for the next couple of directs. If we're going to get Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, ported over, why not get some other games from 3DS instead ported over as well alongside? So I think this kind of goes alongside probably what we can expect for the rest of the Switch's life cycle, which is, the 3DS shop is gone now. How about we resell you those games? Now you can't buy them anymore. So yeah, that might well be the case. I think there are a few cool other things here. One that's kind of a new IP that I want to shout out was Penny's Big Breakaway, which is a 3D platformer, but it is made by the team behind Sonic Mania, a game that, Bally, you have to play this year at some point. But which is an excellent game, a great Sonic game. There was another Sonic game in this presentation. Obviously, Nintendo had to show off Sonic Superstars, which also looks super interesting. But this is it's a neat concept. You basically have a yo-yo, and you use that yo-yo for all of your different things. So it has the great core concept of what you want behind a 3D platform, which is one core ability that is used in unique and interesting ways. And I think that like seeing the footage of it, how well it runs, like it looks like it's running at 60 FPS on Switch, which I think shows what can happen when you make a game dedicated for a piece of hardware, right? And we've seen this before with certain third parties like Platinum with Astral Chain. Astral Chain, one of the best looking games on the system still to this day, because it was made specifically for Nintendo hardware. And it feels like Penny's Big Breakaway is in that same mold, where like it is smooth as hell. You do not often see smaller indie games, 3D games looking this good on Switch. So I'm very interested in that and what it's going to be. But it's being published by Private Division, so it's got some good money behind it, which is very cool. We did see the Mario Kart next booster pack, a little bit of a tease of it. There's a bathroom level that's being shown off. I think, we're getting close to the end of this. This is going to be the second to last one, and then there will be no more Mario Kart 8, and we're going to have to start the clock again for Mario Kart 9. But
perfect timing for potential Switch successor, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I would not be surprised if that is a launch title for whatever comes next. But yes, we are getting to the end of the road here.
Loads of they really focus on characters coming in this wave. So you got like P.T. Piranha, I think, from Double Dash, and
is Wiggler one of them as well? I think
Wiggler. Did you say?
Yeah.
I think he's from the DS, 3DS,
yeah, something like that.
7?
Yeah.
Anyway. Who cares about the characters in Mario Kart? It's all
No,
about
I know.
Come on.
Yeah, nobody does. But anyway, it's something to add. Something to get people interested. And another one that I was super interested in was the remake of Star Ocean 2, Star Ocean Second Story R, which feels like, hey, Octopath seems to have just triggered something with old RPGs where everyone's like, hey, how about we do that too? So yeah, Star Ocean, which apparently this is the best Star Ocean from what people have said, is getting a kind of HD 2D remake. It looks slightly different from that style, but it's
nice
very much
style.
evoking it. Yeah, it is. Has a vibe to it, which I'm down with.
There's always just a random RPG remake in these directs now, isn't there? It's just like
absolutely.
You cannot pick it. It's gonna be so random and just drop, and people like me are gonna be like, "What's that RPG? I've never heard that before. It looks cool. Okay, cool, whatever."
Yeah, but this one at least stood out a bit more because it's not just a up-res, which tends to be the case with a lot of those, right? It just tends to be like, oh, it's a bit prettier. This is full-blown remake, which I think is very neat. And then two games, which I think go together in some way because they're games that are popular but have never been on Nintendo platform before. So the first one is a recent one with Vampire Survivors, finally coming to Switch.
I could have sworn this game was already on Switch.
Yeah, you did say that. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess it hasn't been. But
did we not include this in our discussion?
No, it wasn't. No. It was for Nintendo. Yeah,
okay, fair
didn't
enough,
come to any. It was only on Xbox. It came to last year.
It's still on Game Pass. I should give it a go.
Absolutely, play some Vampire Survivors Ballad. Like, you don't need to play it for long to get what it's going for.
Okay.
You'll get what it's going for pretty quickly, and then you'll probably be hooked for about 10 hours, and then you'll probably stop. But it's
I can't afford donating that amount of time to other
you
games.
can. You definitely can. The thing is with
2023.
Vampire Survivors is like, doesn't feel like the time's passing at all. It just kind of happens to you, So it's worth checking out, I would say. And then a series that I think you've been interested in getting into for a little bit, Bally.
Yes.
Metal Gear Solid is coming. The Master Collection, which is a remastered set of Metal Gear 1, 2,
I know you've
3.
watched them all, but you should really give them a while. Come on.
I probably should. I mean, the thing is, like, the joy of Metal Gear, from my perspective, was watching it because it's so character and story focused, and the mechanics of a PS1 game, I don't know how well they've held up. It might be
people argue that first Metal Gear Solid game holds up decently. But
yeah, I think like cinematically it holds up. I don't, because I've never kind of got my hands on the sticks with those older games. I don't know if they do. My third-hand experience of watching Drew Scanlon play them suggests that they maybe haven't, because there was definitely some fumbles and troubles. I know that he had playing them, but it's definitely a series that it's a foundation of the video game industry, right? If you talk about like what is the what do you call it? What's that thing? The mountain with all the presidents' faces?
Mount Rushmore.
That's the one. What's the Mount Rushmore of a video game? Solid Snake's face would be on that Mount Rushmore, right? Like, absolutely. So I'd be very interested to see, because Val, you have next to no knowledge of Metal Gear, so I'd love to see you just dive in and just like learn everything just firsthand. I think that'd be fascinating. So
there we go.
Yeah, we'll see. And yeah, I think that kind of covers most things. We didn't talk about the Pokemon DLC. I don't have that much interest in it. I think Scarlet and Violet was cool. They should probably spend time fixing. No, should probably spend time fixing the actual base game before selling us more, but they're going to continue to do that. So I know it looked a little bit better. Looked like they had upped production value a little bit and frame rate maybe. I don't know. Looked a little bit improved. And then there are a few things from other Summer Game Fest that got announced. So the Persona 5 Tactics game is coming to Switch, which is really nice to see. No sign of Persona 3 Remake though, which was interesting. Because I would have thought that they would put that on Switch, but it's absent, and I wonder if that means it's too high spec for Switch. They're definitely pushing the boundary with it, because I don't know, Persona 5 is on Switch and it's kind of in the same engine, it looks like. So I don't know, it's weird that they haven't put the Persona 3 Reload onto
Did we
Switch
forget to put Persona games on our top 50 games of all time?
I think you're right. Yeah. That's my bad.
Interesting.
But
okay.
It's fine. Well, there's time for Persona 4
now I can
Golden.
actually try and play one before next time. Then
Yeah,
that
exactly.
should be a goal of mine.
Yeah, shit. I should have got Persona 4 Golden on that. It's fine. Whatever. That's a Vita game at heart, really. So
okay. It might not
but
qualify.
But, it definitely, I think it works pretty well. I did see it on sale recently on Switch. I was like, I should probably buy that again. So I'll probably get back around to it. But, yeah, I think the weirdest one of this was like, Batman Arkham Trilogy. It's like, what fucking year is it, Warner Brothers? Like, why? Why is this coming out now of all times? It's super bizarre. But I'm fascinated to see how Arkham Knight runs on that, because Arkham Knight was not built for even the 360 era, which is kind of what the previous games were, and why it makes sense they would run on Switch. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Don't forget Arkham City Armored Edition, Wii U launch game.
Yeah,
it incorporated the blue light of the Wii U with Batman's armor.
It did, yeah.
And it was exclusive to Wii U.
Yep, you could never get that experience anywhere else.
Why didn't they port that version? Are you kidding me?
They should have done. It should have been Batman Arkham Trilogy (parentheses Armored Edition) for
Nintendo
City.
put all the work in getting all those exclusives for Wii U, and nothing came of it.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't people just buy Mass Effect 3, having not played the first two in a series where it's based on your choices carrying over? Why would they ever do that, EA?
Well, here's a random third-party game I had a blast with on Wii U that has just gotten a remake rumored. Or was it announced? I think it was announced.
Okay.
Was it rumored? It's Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
So yeah, I mean, that basically covers most of the stuff in the direct. There was some other stuff. There's like stuff being ported over. There's DLC for Mario plus Rabbids and Fae Farm and all this other stuff. But I think that covers most of the things that we were interested in. And yeah, overall, Bally, final feelings on this direct?
Very, very strong. Very impressive that Nintendo have just managed to line up their exclusives in this very regimented, impressive way. I would argue for most years of the Switch, they've had a big game every quarter at least, and they are really hitting it out the park in 2023 with a game like, I'm going to get the name right, Super Mario Brothers Wonder, coming out in like October, because we always said like they've got to have a big October or like November game, and we didn't know anything really about what Nintendo were going to do this year other than the predictable Pokemon something at some point. But other than that, like to have Mario Brothers, like 2D Mario, come back for that slot is going to be huge.
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was super solid. Some really fun, good announcements in here, and as much as I enjoyed it, it does really feel like we're getting to the end here now. So let's start wrapping it up. Let's start throwing out these last few games that will carry the Switch into its hopefully final year.
I hope there's not that, and this always seems to happen at the end of like a console life cycle, is you just get this gap where nothing of note comes out for this big long time, partly because they're saving it up for the next system, and then the next system launches, and we have to just endure this gap. It will probably last about a year, starting at some point next year, and I never look forward to that. I think this definitely confirms in my mind that Metroid Prime 4 might not even come to Switch.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that, but like, I mean, I'm not surprised still. I'm still not surprised. This game is not coming out as a Nintendo Switch exclusive. This will be a Twilight Princess / Breath of the Wild. It will be a cross-platform, cross-gen game. Yeah. Absolutely. Launching with the new system. I mean, honestly, probably the best chance to give Metroid Prime 4, any mainstream appeal is...
I'll go one bigger than that. It's going to miss the launch of the next system, and it's going to be console exclusive for the next system. I think it'll ditch Switch. It's going to be only on that new one.
Damn.
That's how slow it's going to be.
All right, well.
2026. Here we go.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it happening. But anyway, the last one more thing I just want to say, because people will shout at me in the comments otherwise. Yes, there was a new Dragon Quest Monsters. I know people love that series. Like it's a series from the Game Boy era and was a Pokemon adjacent game because it's basically Dragon Quest Pokemon essentially. I thought the new one didn't look very good. Like there have been these Dragon Quest spin-offs that they've been bringing out pretty frequently. Like Dragon Quest Treasures came out last year, also looked a bit funky and I don't know, it wasn't great. This one doesn't look very good visually as well. Like it just feels like a very budget kind of game, and I don't know, I feel bad for Dragon Quest Monsters fans. Maybe it'll be good, but I don't know, it didn't look great to me, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, shout out to you sickos in the comments with Dragon Quest Monsters. We'll be back after the break to be more sickos about Nintendo video games and tell you about the ones we've been playing. See you in a bit. All right, folks, welcome back to the second half of today's show. It's time to talk about the video games, what we've been playing. There's some fun stuff that has been happening, obviously, from the Nintendo Direct. And the thing that we're going to kick things off with, Bally, is that very demo that Nintendo mentioned was coming. The Pikmin 4 demo, which dropped about a week after the Direct happened. So in some ways there's a blessing to our recording schedule not lining up with the Direct, in that, you know, we got to talk about the announcement of it, and then we got time to play the demo all the way through, and now we can talk about the demo. So hey, it did work out in some way. But yeah, the other thing that I wanted to bring up, which we forgot to mention in the last segment, is they also shadow dropped Pikmin 1 and 2 just onto the eShop.
But then you can get the hard copy months later. It's like that weird thing again.
It's the same as Metro Prime, isn't it? Like, where I guess they don't see much of a downside to this because they are old games being remastered. So like, most people will just download them digitally, and if you are a weird collector, then you can be a weird collector about it. You just have to wait a bit.
You don't think they'll ever do it with a new game?
I feel like that's too risky for Nintendo.
Like next generation?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so. I think like this only works because it's old games, and most people who are not sickos are not going to be the ones carrying out physical
was there much
copies.
Backlash when Hi-Fi Rush shadow dropped, and was anyone like, oh, I want a hard copy of Hi-Fi Rush?
Oh, I'm sure there were people. Yeah,
okay.
there are those people who exist out there. But I think the problem with the Nintendo faces is most of its fans are old people who like collecting things, right? So I think that's...
No, I'm not sure that's Nintendo's target audience, but that's certainly a big chunk of the hardcore audience, definitely.
Yeah, totally, right? So people, I don't know, I think it's a different thing from Xbox. Like, I feel like that audience is slightly different, and so obviously people want physical copies of stuff. I get it. It's, you know, whatever. But yeah, anyway, they put Pikmin 1 and 2 onto eShop, and...
really cool.
That's great. It's awesome. Like, fully HD remastered. Apparently, they have also brought stuff in from the Wii version of the game. So I think some of the motion controls are maintained, but also the original Pikmin 1 had weird stuff where, like, bomb Pikmin would sometimes explode on your own guys, and they would, you know, ruin a bunch of things that you had set up, or you couldn't split Pikmin by type, and so it was really messed up in the original GameCube version to kind of sort things out, and the Wii version kind of streamlined a few of those things. So all those changes have come to the remasters, which is very cool. And yeah, I definitely want to check these out at some point. It's great that they are now available to people. You can now play every Pikmin game on the Switch, aside from obviously everyone's favorite Pikmin game, Hey Pikmin, but you know, they're saving that for a special edition, of course. But yeah, you can play every mainline Pikmin on Switch, which is really cool, and I like to see Nintendo doing that. It's great from a kind of just preservation standpoint, of course, but like just letting people who are new to Nintendo's franchises, and especially I'm sure a lot of people, Pikmin 4 will be their first Pikmin game.
It's now a 20-year-old franchise with only 4 games in it.
Right,
Kinda
totally.
Weird.
So yeah, it's good for some of the youngins out there to get acquainted with some of those older Nintendo games and how we got to this point. So I'm very happy to see them there, and yeah, I'll definitely be checking them out as someone who is new to the franchise with 3 and has always been interested in going back to the first 2 games. I definitely would like to do that.
It's also a neat way of kicking the can down the road on doing anything to do with GameCube games on Nintendo Switch Online.
Yep, nope, not going to happen. If they can sell as many copies as I'm sure they did of Metro Prime Remastered, then not sure that's going to happen. So yeah, still too modern for their taste. Not, you know, 20 years, not a nostalgia period for Nintendo, so it seems. So yeah. But anyway, the Pikmin 4 demo did come out, and Bally, we both played it. What do you think of this thing? How are you feeling going into Pikmin 4?
It's really, really good.
It's really
I
good.
was thinking, why are we running around as Olimar in a house? What does this have to do with the new game? And then it all kind of comes clear, and you play a day, or in my case 2 days. I think you played 2 days as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
it's just really impressive. The polish, the presentation, the music is through the roof. Like it's a real, and I think mechanically it's just a really nice evolution on the formula, especially the mechanics around Ochi.
Just Ochi, yeah.
Ochi that we can get to, and it's really cool. I'm very excited now for July 21st. Like before, I was thinking Pikmin 4 is going to be a very good game this year. Now I'm thinking it's going to be an excellent to near the top of my list game of the year game this year, if it sticks to landing, obviously. But
I mean, speaking of Metroid, if ever there was doubt that Pikmin was in fact a Metroid game, as I have posited in the past, be in doubt no longer, because this game literally does a what do you call it? Abilities, right? It does the abilities where you start as Olimar with a ton of Pikmin and fully grown up dog wandering around a space, and then all of it gets ripped away from you and you have to start over from the beginning, essentially, right? Like, and you feel it a lot in the first area where there are constant little shortcuts being made and routes that you can move about. It is such a Metroid game, and I love that that's the case, because I think it just works so goddamn well. And yeah, there's lots of neat things going on here. I think the thing that we were maybe most concerned about with this game was controls, because we've talked many times about how Pikmin 3 I think is one of the best controlling games ever, from what it's trying to do, for what it wants to do, and how it executes that, and the best use of motion controls I've ever seen. And so it's like, well, you can't go back to that anymore because you don't have Wii Remote and Nunchuck or a Wii U gamepad to use at the same time. How do you get around this problem of like the kind of the quick way in which you just move your hand and you can just get the Pikmin where you want them, all that sort of stuff? They have opted for a control scheme here that is a more of a lock-on system, a direct lock-on, where anything you are close to, the cursor will basically attach itself to, and it's very intuitive. It basically works exactly when you want it to and how you want it to, and attaches to the thing that you're looking for. You have a bit of a lock-on option as well if you want to, but I found it a little weird to begin with, where you're walking around and this cursor is just stuck out in front of you wherever you're facing, wherever you go, and it felt a little bit weird. But once I started using it, once I started getting my head around it, it felt very natural and intuitive. How have you felt about it, Bob?
Yeah, I agree. It's a big concern of mine. I'd never played the Pikmin 3 remake on Switch, and it was one of the best aspects of Pikmin 3 was that Wiimote and Nunchuck combined with the Wii U gamepad. I'd probably still prefer Pikmin 3's controls, but like for what they do with what's on offer, with obviously the use of the Switch, I think is great. It works really well. It's just got like that kind of snappy lock-on thing that kind of snaps on and off when you're just kind of near, and it's just very clean and crisp, and it's that satisfaction of the feedback with the sound design and stuff like that that just makes it very clear to you as the player when it's locked on and not, and when to throw a Pikmin or not, and just that kind of just very clear, crisp game design.
Yeah, and I think they kind of had to do this because of the perspective shift, right? So the fundamental change here is that we're no longer fully locked into an isometric camera. Now, I did realize that you can zoom the camera out. If you move the analog stick, the right analog stick back, it does start to move your camera further away. So you can get a bit more of a bird's eye view, which is nice. But really, the game is built to be played more from a ground level, where you are behind the back of your little guy and you're controlling Pikmin from a perspective that is more akin to being in a Toy Story world, where you feel tiny in a giant space, and you're less of a commander looking down on it, less of a god figure in that sense. And I don't know, I think it definitely is a good compromise, given that that's the direction they're going in. I like the change in perspective. I think it means that there's a bit more detail to some of the environments and stuff like that. And I think it's I don't know, it just gives it a different feel, a different vibe. But I didn't like the beginning where they just kind of plastered the controls like right over the top of it, and I was like, couldn't find a way to turn it off. I was like, I guess it's just a tutorial thing that I just have to get through. But I did feel a little claustrophobic.
I mean, I loved the tutorial generally. I thought it was a very nice, laid out, slow paced, step by step.
The Bally tutorial, if ever there was one.
Gradually layering on mechanics. I do love a slow paced tutorial that just gets your head around sometimes complex controls. I don't think the controls are too complex, but I do think there's actually a lot of mechanics in this game that aren't in Pikmin 3 to like get your head around, especially around Ochi, that maybe we can get into. Like, I think that Ochi, on a base level, you can just use him as a very powerful Pikmin, whether that's attacking enemies or moving around goods. You can kind of use Ochi like that, but on like a more high level play, he's a bit like an all-in-one character and Pikmin, where you can ride on him and jump on him and use him to switch buttons. You can leave him, I was just explaining to you before, like you can leave him at your base camp and then go do something with your character, and then when all your Pikmin come back to base camp, you can then use Ochi to carry all the Pikmin back to where you are. Like I think when you think about high level play ways of using Ochi, there's a lot that I still need to get my head around and just try and work out like most efficient ways of using him. And I think the game is going to gradually roll those out. Like it seems like he's a very big part of like this. That's kind of like a skill tree now in the game, essentially.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you got to that, because that was definitely a thing. I was like, oh, now I'm going to have to collect different. You collect those gems, those kind of shiny objects that act as a currency of sorts that you can then, when you go back to your base, invest them into upgrades, which is a new thing for the series and it hasn't had it before. And I wonder how far that goes. I know Nintendo have talked about it before, but is it just to do with Ochi, or is there other stuff that you can enhance your own abilities? I'm very interested to see what comes of that. But yeah, they definitely, I upgraded him so he can now move an object that is a weight of 5 Pikmin or more, right? And increasing his attack level. There is some finickiness, I will say, in terms of switching to him, because you basically have to hold down Y and then it opens up a menu that you click on him and then you have to decide to switch to him. It's just a little slow, especially in one of the caves I did. And I don't know if you did this one. There's a cave with conveyor belts.
Yes.
And Ochi is separated from you and you have to switch to him and switch back, and like it was just a little bit clunky and slow to get between him and your main character.
Yeah.
And that was the worst part of the demo for me, was that section underground. The rest of it I think was pretty seamless. That was the kind of the only friction point. But like, you can get him up these escalators by using his run because he's fast enough to go past it. But then you're in a situation where you're like, well, he's up there, but the Pikmin are down here, but my other guy's over there. Like, it was just a little finicky. So I hope there's less of that as the game goes on, and maybe that was just like a rough point. But yeah, I wish it was a bit more seamless. And maybe, so I just realized at the end of the demo, they were telling me, they were reiterating to me, oh, by the way, you have shortcuts on your D-pad. I wonder if one of those D-pad shortcuts can be an instant just switch to
I really
Ochi.
hope so, because it was very finicky and annoying. And what's crazy is that a lot of the mechanics around Pikmin 3 are designed to switch between your 3 party members. And I remember distinctly it being not only being a single button press, but the switch was often so fast that you could start moving your character that you've just switched to before the camera even gets to your character. Like it's like an in-world real-time bang. It just switches immediately.
Yeah.
Whereas there's just, it's so clunky with like switching between your character and Ochi. You're right. I forgot about that, but like it is actually really concerning if there are so many levels designed where you're switching constantly. And I hope it's a quick toggle and not just that clunky system.
I think it's just like the idea of holding the Y button as well, which takes a little bit more time than you want, it's not as seamless as you would like it to be. And I mean, part of this is that we don't have a whole touchscreen to be utilizing as a secondary implement this time, which could display map information and also let you just give commands. Like, the Wii U gamepad was such a great addition to Pikmin as an idea that getting rid of it just inherently means you lose something in the process, and I think that just leads to a little bit less streamlined stuff going on here. But yeah, I like the idea of Ochi as a additional big Pikmin, but also he has his ability to jump, which is important because your character, and you've never been able to jump in Pikmin, right? The ability to jump is really interesting, but also you can then use him to barge into things, and so he can rush enemies, or he can knock down pots, or just move around in a more efficient, fast way, which I think is always good. Something I'm always looking for in video games, going fast, right? So riding on Ochi is a nice little way to get around a bit more efficiently.
Did you notice that after you do a dash, he kind of slows down?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's clearly done so that you don't just dash everywhere. It's clearly equals, I would guess it's equal speed to run everywhere as it is to dash everywhere.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the case. I feels like a Nintendo hate speedrunners type of move.
Yeah, it was like, wow, this feels like a bit of a dick move, to be honest. Yeah. But okay, whatever, fine.
Yeah.
You will play the game in our way. You don't want to enjoy it in other ways. There's only one way to enjoy this game.
Yeah. I think the main thing that I want to talk about is these kind of dungeon areas, right? So there is the overworld, and you go around and you explore and you create shortcuts for yourself and you find objects. And the whole idea here is you're building up what's it called? Like, it begins with an S. Shinilium or something. I don't know. It's like a sterillium. It's a made up science word. Stellium. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It begins with an S. It's a sciencey word. It's something. You basically you get it from getting objects, like real world objects. Yeah, man. Juice. God, I do love the juice. I miss the juice.
Okay, very quick side tangent. The two things I really miss from Pikmin 3. One, the delectable fruit squashing. Where the hell is it? I need my fruit. You need to squash it.
You got to play Ring Fit Adventure, man. That's where they put that.
It needs to be turned into juice. Let's play Ring Fit Adventure. And secondly, where's my end of day mini map with the Pikmin running around and sped up, showing how they ran throughout the day? Like that was such a satisfying little mini map to watch at the end of the day. But anyway,
very true.
Where have they gone? I demand them back. You were saying.
Where was I? I think I was talking about going down the dungeons, right? So you do all that sort of stuff in the overworld, and you collect. The whole currency of this game is collecting objects, real world objects, in order to turn them into fuel essentially for your ship, so that you can get off the planet. Blah blah blah. But there are, in the overworld, a bunch of little buckets that you jump down and you head into these little underground spaces. And the nice thing is there's no timer in those spaces, so you can kind of take as much time as you want, and they feel very kind of puzzle boxy, and you're almost like rooting your way around. And there's a whole thing on them that gives you a percentage of how much stuff you've got, so you can go and get 100% of everything. If there's stuff hidden, it's really nice to just comb the entire area. It is one of those things where I will 100% every single floor in every single one of these, right? It feels like that is the draw here, and that's what they want you to do.
I think they might get very big as well.
Yeah, they potentially can, because one thing that I noticed was, hey, these are not just one floor affairs sometimes. Sometimes they are multiple floors. And so I had a situation where I was about to go back to the set. I was like, why am I not? Oh, wait, I went down? The rocket went down the hole. Oh, I'm still here. Oh, there's a second floor. Oh, no. And immediately I'm like, well, the late part of this game, we're going to be like 5-floor, 6-floor dungeons, right? And that's going to be really interesting.
I think in Pikmin 2, I hadn't played a ton of that game, and I had already done like a more than 6-floor dungeon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think they're going to go big.
You think they're going to go even bigger than that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. All right. That's exciting stuff, I think. I think part of the exciting nature of that is you have limited Pikmin down there. There's not a lot of ways to get them back. And so it almost is we can do Tears of Kingdom comparisons, right? But there is like the depth in that game, you lose your hearts permanently. Going down here, you kind of lose Pikmin and you can't really get them back easily, so you kind of have to be on full survival duty. I felt like a Pikmin, not savant, but someone who's like, oh, I know what you're doing here, because there was an enemy down in one of those holes, which is a kind of a flat guy, a flat pancake rock guy, and he had fire on top of him, underneath him as well. But I threw a bunch of red Pikmin on him, and they were doing damage, and then he started lifting himself up. I'm like, oh god, he's going to squash all those Pikmin underneath him and kill them, and I called them back immediately. I was like, I know what I'm doing, I'm a Pikmin pro. So I called them back, none of them died, and then I threw them back on again. I'm like, that feels good, right? I think part of the joy of combat in Pikmin is looking at enemy patterns and recognizing, oh no, they're about to fall flat on all these Pikmin, they are going to get crushed and die.
Yeah.
So I have to be proactive about that.
I didn't find that enemy. That's very cool.
Yeah, so you have to be proactive, call them back, and make sure that you are being careful. Because I think in this demo, especially in the overworld, there are not a lot of enemies where you need to think about it that much. You just kind of chuck them and they die. And it's good to see already that there are enemy types that they're introducing that will cause a threat, and you will have to think about it a little bit more, which is really good. So, I have a lot of excitement for those dungeons, and I think that it's a nice balance that you have of, okay, I'm going to do as much of this overworld stuff as I can. I'm going to ping on my map. Like it does a nice job of keeping on your map as well which ones you've done and which ones you haven't. If you've completed it, you get a little flag next to it, and if you haven't, you get like a little arrow that says you can still go down here. So I thought that was a really cool thing, and it almost creates a a schedule where you can be like, okay, today my focus is going to be on the overworld. Tomorrow I'm going to go to all those dungeons that I unlocked instead, and that's going to be my focus. And I think that's it can create a really nice loop. And if you want to, you can just keep bouncing between the two. And it's very, very neat. Did you get to building a bridge at all in this?
I did. I built a couple, and I'm not the biggest fan of that mechanic. So in the demo, you gain this material that then goes to your rocket ship, and then your scientist or engineer or whoever is on board can turn that material into different materials. So in this case, you gain the material and it turns it into clay to build bridges. Traditionally in Pikmin, there are normally like bridge parts near bridge sites,
or scattered about somewhere else, right?
Or maybe inside an enemy or something weird.
Yes.
And like you have to collect them all and they eventually come to the bridge. I kind of like the in-world nature of the idea of Pikmin 3 in previous games, where the bridge parts are just there and then you collect them and build the bridge. Whereas there's something a bit like missing the point of, you get a Pikmin to the bridge and then where you want to build the bridge, and then they run back to the ship, they get out some clay from the ship and then build the bridge, if that makes sense. Like I'm sure mechanically I'll prefer this method by the end of the game, but just briefly in the demo, it slightly missed a tiny bit of the magic that's there in the other Pikmin games, I feel. I don't know.
I see that, yeah. Like, especially because a lot of the bridges you built in the previous games were like, well, it's clearly like a plant pot that's been broken, but we're going to repurpose it here for a different thing, as opposed to, I'm just collecting this all-purpose resource that then just becomes whatever I need it to, whenever I need it to. I think part of the issue there as well is, well, I wouldn't call it an issue. I think it's a really nice mechanic, which is the multiple location bases, where you come across a new area and you're like, oh, I can just move my base to this area, which makes it much easier to carry things over if I'm closer to, if I have like a really big watermelon or something and my base is all the way over there. What if I just move my base to this place instead? And now it's much quicker to just get things going. So I think because in my situation with the bridge, and I don't know if it's the same one for you, I moved my base right next to where the bridge was, and so it was like, oh, it's just going to go straight from there to the bridge, and it didn't feel like I was going on a journey or like finding something in order to make it happen. It just kind of happened because my base was right there next to it. So yeah, definitely I get a bit of that vibe for sure.
I mean, I don't really see the main point of moving the base, because normally, like, yes, it's annoying when Pikmin go and do something, and then once they do something and bring it back to the ship, you then have to go get them. But I thought the game was about to drop layers of, well, here's another character, and this is how you switch between them, and this is how you coordinate more so that you don't end up running back and forth. And, you know, part of the joy of Pikmin is that the world kind of loops back on itself often, and
which this game does, right? There's loads of shortcuts being opened up. You push down the bags and it creates a little ramp, and that's nice. But yeah. So I don't know why they'd want to change that and then have a separate base, when I like that it always just loops back, and then you work out ways of using different teammates to, one can wait by the base. So then when you're doing something in one part of the world, the character by the base can grab the Pikmin and then go to the point of action again. You know, like it feels like maybe it'll become clear why there's this change, but it's not clear to me yet. Yeah, I wonder. I guess like Pikmin 3's whole gimmick was the multiple captains that you had control over. I think to distinguish it from that and the new camera change and everything, they probably just didn't want to go in that direction. So I guess this is a compromise, right? It's basically a compromise to say, well, you don't have the ability to move people around and explore the map with multiple different characters. So we're gonna make it more convenient the further you get through a map, you know, because I imagine some of the later places get quite large, right? And so you don't want to have a situation where you're spending so much time just traversing all the way back to the one point where the base originally is. So yeah, I like it. I think it's a decent change, but yeah, there's definitely some valid criticisms there. And I don't know, I'm interested about like how many more like pilots or people you'll find in their little suits, because I initially was like, oh, they're setting up this mission where there's like a bunch of blank characters, right, silhouettes, and there's like 6 or 7 of them, And what happens is within like the first hour of the demo, I found 4 people already. So I was like, well, this clearly isn't going to be a thing that goes over the course of the game. But then what happened was we started finding people who were not a part of that crew, right? So I guess that was their setup, but you're likely going to find all those kind of initial crew members quite early, but then you just continue to go out and find more people who have been stranded here or whatever. And I'm sure they will function in some way, because one of the guys I unlocked who was not part of the picture was Schnauz, who's the treasurer. So you can go to him and you can basically look at all the treasures that you've got and the names for all of them and all that sort of stuff. So I wonder what the other people you collect will end up doing, or if they'll end up doing anything.
So they're all some form of mechanic, or
maybe
game mechanic, I should say. Like they're just kind of layering on mechanics one by one, I guess it seems.
Yeah, potentially. But yeah, I'm not sure what's going to go on with that. It seems like the core idea here is finding Olimar, and I mean, we kind of saw from the trailer and from the Nintendo Direct, hey, there's this guy with this dog, which, you know, you see that green dog at the very start of the game with Olimar. So, hey, I guess Olimar got turned into a weird leaf creature because that's what he looked like in that trailer. So there's something weird going on, some, I don't know, mind control or something strange, but Olimar seems to be both villain and your kind of quarry, which is an interesting thing, and I wonder how that will develop. But yeah, I don't know, the idea of you didn't try any of the like Dandori stuff, did you? Because I think that's in the demo and you can go and do that separately, but I think that might be something that you will have to do in the campaign and play against Olimar in some of those, which I'm not sure how I feel about, because it's, I don't know, I remember playing some Pikmin 2 multiplayer with you back in the day, and obviously I didn't really understand what I was doing back then, so I didn't really enjoy it. But
I don't think 2 had multiplayer. I think it was 3.
No, I definitely played multiplayer at your house, Pikmin 2. I absolutely have that memory.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I believe that was the case, and I mean, I didn't enjoy it back then, but I'm not sure what this whole thing is about and how it works. But if it is like doing the whole efficiency thing against each other, it's definitely an interesting concept. And yeah, I wonder how they develop it in the final game.
I enjoy those like head-to-heads in Pikmin 3, and yeah, I just googled it. It was in Pikmin 2 as well, but like yeah, they did. There's a few more modes in Pikmin 3, and I remember playing those a lot in London. And I really like the competitive stuff. So if that becomes part of the main campaign, that could be cool.
Yeah, seems very interesting. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to that. But yeah, I think overall, just super impressed with this demo. I'm just counting down the days now till I can play Pikmin 4 and actually get in there and, clear out that area. And it really does feel like I want 100% this game, right? Like there's a real satisfaction to it, cleaning up every area, getting every single trinket that you can find. And yeah, I think visually the game looks really, really nice as well. I think obviously, you still on Switch, we have a 30 FPS cap and all that sort of stuff, but as with the best Nintendo games, you don't really notice it because they do a great job with stuff like frame pacing, and just visually the game has a really nice look to it. So yeah, it's turning out great, which is exactly what we wanted and hoped. And there's definitely differences. And I wonder at the end of this if I come out still thinking Pikmin 3 is better, because I mean Pikmin 3 is a remarkable game. But yeah, there's definitely hope here for it to match that, if not potentially better.
I think if Pikmin 4 can stick the landing on maybe like the final boss, because the final boss of Pikmin 3 I did not enjoy much.
It was interesting. It was a different thing for sure.
Yeah, but I think there's opportunity for Pikmin 4 to surpass it, but we'll see.
Yeah, we shall see. Fantastic. Well, the other thing that I have played mainly is a little small game called Dordogne. And I did look up the pronunciation of this multiple times, because it is one of those names that I look at and I'm like, I remember French. I was good at it. The one thing that Mr. Morris said I was good at was my French accent. When I said le cuisse de grenouille, which is frog's legs, of course, in French, that was the thing. He's like, wow, you have a good at. And the rest of my French, not great, but my accent was on point. So when I saw Dordogne, I thought it was Dordogne, and it turns out it is in fact Dordogne, but because there's no accent on it, I was like, well, is it Dordogne or is it Dordogne, right? Like, but I looked it up. That is the case. It's like lasagna. It's Dordogne, basically, is how I'm phrasing it.
Yeah, I would have gone with that, Dordogne, but yeah, right. Interesting.
Yeah, so I did. I looked it up and heard some French people say it, and that is the case. So this is a game that's been shown off in a few Indie World presentations, actually, and I think people will remember it for its kind of striking art style. It's basically like watercolor painting, where you play as this young girl in the French countryside. She lives with her grandmother, or she's there for the summer basically. And so the girl's called Mimi, and there's a bit of time jumping in this where you play as her in the present day, where she's like a 20-year-old, like maybe early 20s, mid 20s, and she's going back to her grandmother's house, and it's abandoned, it's empty. Her grandmother has passed away, and so she's going back there to collect some things, and her grandmother's left her a letter, that type of thing. It's one of those twee indie stories, right, where it's going to get emotional and all that sort of stuff. So you start out in that way, and as you go through the house, and you don't really have a memory of what happened back then. For some reason, there's like an amnesiac blank spot of that summer that you spent with your grandmother. And so you're going back, and as you go through the house and you sort through things, certain objects trigger memories, and that's when it will push you back into the past, and you start playing as a 10-year-old version of this character, and you just start wandering around the environment, and doing the kind of narrative stuff. So it is very much a narrative-led game. You can walk around the kind of small house environment, and you just basically go and do different things by, like, talking to your grandmother, going to the village, and collecting shopping to make a meal, that sort of stuff. And there's a kind of narrative through line that has to do with the family and how Mimi's father fell out with their grandmother and all that sort of stuff. So there's like a kind of family narrative here and context to it, and you're mainly interacting through kind of like point and click elements where you will, for example, you'll get to a door and you'll have a key, and you have to kind of physically move the key into the lock. So there's a bit of a tangibility to it where you are required to manually move this thing, put it in, and then twist the stick in order to rotate it into the lock and open the door. And then you have to move your cursor onto the handle and rotate the handle, and then you have to put the cursor on the door and push the door open. So literally every step of opening the door you are physically, tangibly doing, which is kind of neat. Like it's got a kind of cool feel to it in that sense. And in some ways I don't know if it feels like padding, but the game is quite short and everything is quite slow and deliberate. And so it feels like they are almost kind of stretching the amount of stuff they have here, just so they can get to like a reasonable playtime. But it's nothing that's going to tax you in any way. It's definitely just like a light interactivity thing. And there's some neat stuff in there. There's a little section where you're riding down the river, and you're basically just controlling a little canoe as you go down there on your way to kind of adventure and find stuff. You end up kind of meeting this like other young boy who has his own backstory, and you go adventuring, exploring. There's like a whole cavern section you go through, and some very, very nice visuals. I will say that generally the backgrounds and the art holds up very well. I'd say it gets a little bit weird because everything in the background is water painted and colored, but you are a 3D model. And so weird. When you're walking on that stuff, you can very much see the artifice of this is a game, where I would sometimes be moving through an environment and I just bump into an invisible wall, but it wouldn't feel like I should because just the way the thing was painted. And it's an interesting mix of like 3D objects plus painting. Reminds me a little bit of what Planet of Lana was doing, but I think Planet of Lana pulled it off much more seamlessly, right? Especially when you're in kind of 2D, and that game doesn't have much friction points when it comes to just like running into stuff. Whereas this one felt a little, not janky, but you can tell it was made on a budget and it's a smaller thing. And there's weird moments where it will load into a new area and it won't fully like load stuff, and it'll be a little bit off. But I liked it generally. I think it's I would say it's inoffensive. I feel like the story doesn't really resolve fully. Like the whole thing I was talking about with the father and the grandmother, you never really find out what the reason for that was or what the rift.
You're saying you needed more resolution in the narrative.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Okay. But like, I think that's because it is a bit more of a straightforward narrative, right? Like it isn't trying to masquerade as a literary thing. It's very much just like, here's a story about this family. And I don't think it really provides the answers that you're looking for necessarily. So, it's cool. And at the end, there's there's an explanation for like why you've lost your memory, I guess, and that sort of thing. But I think it was neat. And I would say I probably wouldn't recommend people going out and just picking up full price on Switch. I would say, like, if you're interested, if this is the kind of thing you like, then wait for a sale and check it out. But
it's a good Game Pass game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it definitely, I like approaching these games because they tend to be games that are very short and contained, and I can beat them in a couple of days and I feel good about myself. But I don't know if I think they are necessarily games that are worth playing through sometimes, right? Like, I played a Memoir Blue, was it last year or year before? And that was like only a couple hours long, but I was like, I don't know if I should have played that, right? Like, there are some narrative games, I think, in the indie space that are nice and twee and okay, but they never leave me with any sense of memorable narrative or anything that I'm going to take away from them. They just kind of wash over me, and I play them, and I'm done. And then I never really think about them again, right? And sometimes it's a bit of a flip of the coin, because on the other side of that, you get narrative games in the indie space which really rock my socks and really blow me away. So it is sometimes a bit of a, kind of a betting on, is this going to be something that's going to capture me? It's either basically it becomes one of my favorite things and like I really love it, or it just is kind of just doesn't hit at all. I don't feel like there's much in the middle space there when it comes to this kind of experience. But always worth trying, and I never really regret playing these types of games, because I'm like, well, it was only a couple hours, it didn't take much of my time, and it was relaxing. I will say I fell asleep playing this game, so I was when I first.
How many games can you say that for?
Yeah, not a lot. God, there's few moments, because we all know that Bally is a big napping person. He naps all the time. It's part of his schedule. I never nap. I'm not a napper. And so when I fall asleep to something, like something, not something that's wrong, but something's going on. I remember times at uni when I would be watching Nintendo Capri Sun's Plants vs. Zombies Let's Play, and I just fall asleep in my chair because it was so relaxing. It was just his voice and the gameplay.
What angle is your chair at? How do you fall asleep in a chair?
I don't know. It was like it's like an officey chair, but with a back that could kind of lean back a little bit,
Okay. And the head support?
Yeah, definitely head support.
Okay.
And same here. So I was on a sofa, like a single sofa, basically. So it was very relaxing and chill. But basically, this was on a day when I was sick. So I was literally like hay fever, the worst possible, and I was just really sick and exhausted and tired. I was like, well, I'll just start this thing and see what happens. And it was like a warm day, and there was a bit of breeze coming through from the window, and the music was just really relaxing. And I was just like sitting there, and I just felt my eyes closing. And then they just closed, and then I was gone. I was just asleep. I had a nap for like an hour and a half. And then I woke up, I was like, oh, Jesus. And then I was annoyed because, as you know, we tend to be this way where, we want to keep our game play time correct. And I now have an extra hour and a half added.
It's a 2-hour game.
Yeah, exactly, to Dordogne. So there you go. But anyway, that's a game. It's neat. If you are interested in it, check it out at some point. Excellent. The other thing I wanted to touch on, Bally, is something that I haven't been able to talk about. I guess because Zelda came out and that was the main focus, and then we had our big episode of 250 and that was the main focus. But what I actually did was, before, I was actually going to go to Japan, I was being prepared for it. And, one of the things that I was being annoyed by was my old Switch had a bad battery, and it was just dying really quickly. I did a couple of plane trips from, Edinburgh to London, and, it was just gone. The battery was absolutely destroyed. I was playing Xenoblade, and it went from, 90 to about 20 in the space of a plane flight. And I was like, this is not on. I can't do this.
How long was the plane flight?
An hour.
Oh,
a 1 hour
okay.
flight,
right.
Yeah, which is rough, right? That is really bad. So I was like, I have to do something about this. This is not going to stand. So I decided I was going to do what everyone else on Twitter was doing, at least I was seeing, which was buying the new Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Special Edition Switch OLED. And I think because we are early adopters, we never end up getting these nice consoles because we buy them day one, and then we're like, cool. I have it now. I'm not going to get another one. Only in the case of
There's some exceptions.
Handhelds, right? Handhelds, and Switch is part of that family, I guess now. But that's a case where I have 3DSs, and I have three 3DSs, right? Because I wanted to have different varieties of them as they came out with new versions. But generally have not been someone who owns special editions of stuff. And so it was nice where I'm like, you know what? I'm getting a new Switch. It's an OLED model. I might as well just splash out and spend the extra 20 quid and get the nice fancy Zelda edition. So that's what I did. I got the Switch OLED Zelda edition. And as soon as I started playing stuff on the Switch OLED, I realized that I had seen the light. And here's the thing. People talk about it's a big step up, all that sort of stuff. There's no power increase or anything, but I swear to God it feels like there is, because this screen, like, I cannot imagine going back to the regular Switch handheld now. It feels like an archaic piece of plastic. Like, it feels old.
Is it like going from the Game Boy Advance to the backlit SP?
I think it's a more significant step than that.
That's a bold claim. That's a very
It is a bold claim, but here's the thing that I will tell you about it. Like, I bought a Steam Deck last year, and I love the Steam Deck. I think it's fantastic. I now would rather play stuff on my Switch OLED than my Steam Deck, because that's how fucking good this screen looks. This is one of the best looking screens I have seen in my life. It is vibrant to a point of just like pure saturation, but incredible. And the size increase is so huge. When you think about like the bezels on the original Switch, they take up such a huge amount of space. And even though it's just pushing to those bezel limits and pushing all the way to the edge of the screen,
it's just catching dust and crap that slides into it as well that you just can't clean.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of and there's still a little bit of that with the OLED, if I'm honest, but the clarity, the size, it's the size of this screen, how much larger it feels. It's honest, like playing Mario Kart 8 on this thing, I'm like, this feels like fucking Switch 2. Like, it honestly is such a massive step up that I'm super impressed by it. And I think it's one of those things where if you don't play handheld very much, it doesn't make sense to get a Switch OLED, really, right? If you're just purely playing it on TV, then it doesn't matter, because it looks the exact same on the TV. None of that's going to change. But if you're like me and you prefer handheld and you mainly play handheld, then this is, I mean, it's an unquestionable upgrade. And obviously we're very close to potentially a new system coming out, but I don't regret it. You know, even if a new system comes out next year, I don't regret having bought this thing, because I think it's just such a significant, it basically feels like it's giving more life to this system that makes me want to play even more stuff on it, and that's great. Now, here's the drawback, Bally. We've talked much on this podcast about Nintendo and their various issues with hardware, with the Switch and Joy-Con drift, and even at the very beginning when the Switch first came out, you know, people experiencing disconnecting from the Switch itself, right? With the weird stuff inside, and you had the rubber, the kind of foam thing that people were doing to modify it to make sure it didn't lose connection, all that sort of stuff. They have not fixed any of that, because I have multiple problems with this Switch OLED, and one of them I had to go and fix today. So one of the things that I noticed straight away was that the left Joy-Con, as soon as I started moving it, I heard this weird metallic sound. I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Like a rubbing metallic sound, or?
No, like a springy metallic sound. So when I move the right Joy-Con analog stick, you can hear the spring in the analog stick. You can hear it slightly clicking and slightly moving, and not, it feels like it's a rusty nail or something. Like, it feels like a rusty piece of a spring that every time I move it, you can hear it. Now, it doesn't affect any gameplay stuff, but the thing is, if you're in a quiet environment and you like don't have the volume up that much, it is so fucking annoying. Like, it is this tiny little thing niggling in the background, like, and you just hear this spring just moving. I'm like, what the hell is the quality control going on here, Nintendo? Like, it's unbelievable. Now, having used it for a bit more, it feels like it's going away slowly. So, and I did do a thing, well, actually, people were saying, do like rubbing alcohol underneath it, and that kind of fixes the problem. I haven't tried that yet, but I've heard that's a potential fix. So I might go down that route if I want to. Recently, I haven't had as many problems because I'm kind of playing it with the volume higher and or with headphones, and so as long as you have that stuff, you won't notice it at all. You don't necessarily feel it in the stick, but you can hear it in the stick, and it is incredibly annoying. And you know, I don't know, I'm someone who, if you have a very small thing that annoys me, I will obsess about it and become hyper-focused on it, and it will just ruin any experience, right? So it's not good. Compounding that fact is that a lot of Switches, and I think some older Switches as well, have this issue where when you attach the Joy-Con, it doesn't fully snugly fit onto the rail, which means that it can move slightly up or slightly down, and it's almost imperceptible. It's like a very slight movement, but both sides of the Switch OLED, the Joy-Con slightly moved up, slightly moved down. So when I was holding it, it might slide down slightly. And, you know, it doesn't come off the rail, it's still locked in, it's all that stuff, but it was just so frustrated. Like, I was, every time I picked it up, I'd just be like, oh god, it's just moving slightly up, and then I move it down, and then moves up. I'm just
it's
like
a brand new bit of kit as well. You don't expect a brand new thing to just have like these annoying issues. Like,
exactly.
Maybe after
Out
3-4 years of use, but like,
yeah, totally.
Infuriating.
But like, I was so used to my original Switch where I never had a problem with the Joy-Cons moving. Like, they've always felt very tight and snug in place, essentially, and so they wouldn't move around. And so like, I kept wanting to play stuff on my OLED, but I kept being not wanting to play it because every time I did, I just feel that little movement every time, and I'm just like, oh god, this fucking sucks. Like, it was infuriating. My brain was just on fire. I hated it. And so I was looking up, like, is there a way to deal with this aside from going to Nintendo and saying, hey, you know, give me a new one, essentially, which I didn't want to do. And the problem with that is that once you've done a whole transfer over, it's just a fucking pain in the ass to like get a new Switch and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's terrible. But what I saw online was a video of people saying, hey, here's what you can do. So on the rail of the Joy-Con, on the rail of the Switch, if you look at the Switch and you take the Joy-Con off and you look at it on a sideways perspective, there's a whole rail segment. Then underneath the rail segment, it continues down, but it's just like a kind of flat piece of metal, essentially, right? It's just a flat bit. And the Joy-Con also has that segment, right? So there's the rail on the Joy-Con, and then underneath it, there's like a flat piece of plastic, essentially, for the rest of the Joy-Con to finish. And what you can do is you can go and buy electric tape. They call it in America electric tape. I learned to hear it's called insulation tape when I asked the guy, because all these guides are in American, so they're all like electric tape. So I asked this guy, and he's like, "No, we've got insulation tape." And that's the same thing.
What shop are you in here? What is
I just went out to a random hardware shop, basically on the street, and just walked in. I was like, "Oh, they probably have this kind of stuff." So went there, bought this thing, which was insulation tape, and it basically is tape that if you cut it out into a small square and then stick it on that bottom metal part of the Switch, and then you put the Joy-Con on top of it, the issue disappears. Basically, you're creating friction at the bottom where it can't move anymore. And so it's not even wiggling sideways. Like, my Joy-Cons now feel secure as hell, basically like they're bolted onto the system, and they are not moving at all, because I've basically applied, so it depends on the thickness of the tape, but I had to apply 3 layers of insulation tape on top of each other in order to create a high enough bump to where when I slide it down, it basically just locks into place and doesn't move anymore. And so now it's great. Now it works perfectly. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. The only weirdness is when you try and take the Joy-Cons off, you do have to move them a little bit more strongly, because obviously they're stuck a bit more in place now, because they have the insulation tape basically buffering them, right? So it's like a little bulge outside to just lock them in place, essentially.
So you sorted it.
I've sorted it now.
And
so I've been playing
the analog stick clicking.
No, that's still there. But as I said, it's kind of going away over time.
Are you going to get some rubbing alcohol? Or are you going
I think I might. Yeah, I might try and see if I can find rubbing alcohol and just put it a little bit under the flap and just see if that does anything.
DIY though, like, come on, it's just
right. Like, I should not have to do any of this. This is a brand new system, the limited fucking edition from Nintendo, and it had multiple issues out the box, and it was just gnawing at me, and it was a pain in the ass. And look, I've found a way around it now, and it's working, but I shouldn't have to do that. And yeah, I mean, like you were saying last segment, we need this new system to be great and to not have any of these issues, because like, Nintendo has such a good history of solid, reliable hardware that will last you a lifetime, that will not have any issues. I've never had a single issue.
The Game Boy Classic from Vietnam, like, it's famous. Like, that thing works. It's like, they need bomb-proof gaming devices. That's what they need to specialize in.
The only other problem I've had with the Nintendo system up to this point is my DS Lite, which obviously a lot of DS Lites had the hinge problem. The hinge cracked on my DS Lite, and it's completely fucked now. It just flops open, flops closed, doesn't stay at any angle, which sucks, because I love the DS Lite and I think it's a great system. But yeah, it's completely screwed because the handle, the hinge on the that thing is gone. But other than that, I've had zero problems. And man, multiple switches and multiple issues over the years, like between Joy-Con drift and the weird connection problem, and now all the Switch OLED stuff is a pain. I was looking online, and a lot of people with Switch OLEDs are like, "Yep, got this straight out of the box, and it had this problem." And I'm like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, it is absolutely baffling, and yeah, they really need to fix it, because it's not great. But yeah, I mean, the main thing I've been playing on it is Octopath Traveler 2, Bally,
Oi.
which is great. Been enjoying it quite a bit. I just today, right before we started recording, finished Ochet's chapter, which is the last character to get. So I now have everybody,
Nice.
which is cool. And I've basically been leveling up to like everyone up to 15 essentially. So the thing that again annoys me is like you finish a chapter, most of the time they're level 7, and like it doesn't take too long to get them up, but it's like, why? Like, why do I have to do this? Like, it just feels like a bit of wasted time of, now I just have to...
That's like doing quite a lot of preemptive grinding here.
I am, basically, yeah. I'm basically making sure everyone is around level 14, 15, so that I can just go into chapter 2s where everything kind of starts at level 14, and then I can just kind of go from there and hopefully naturally get a bit more of a curve. And if I balance people out as I go, then hopefully it kind of equals it out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a chore, but the harder you work at balancing everyone out, the more fun you'll have down the line. Like, it's
and
annoying,
I don't mind kind of doing it now because it's in short bursts of like, okay, I'm kind of going to this town, so I'll just turn it to night and I'll just do a few fights, right? And then I'll kind of make it there. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I think overall, I think I'm still invested in Oswald's story the most so far. The first one that I did, but I think the other ones are good so far.
The story goes places. Oh, I can't wait till you find out what happens.
I think all of them kind of start out solidly. I would say Casty's might be one of the more boring ones to begin with, just from a kind of
she became one of my favorites, but
like I can see it going interesting places, but I think just what you do in that first chapter is basically just like, you're just healing people around a town, and you kind of go to a cave with some grimy monsters and kill them, and it wasn't very interesting.
Weak.
I actually liked Ochet's quite a bit, like the whole Pokemon thing, and I'm already kind of capturing creatures. And
which creature did you pick?
I went with the owl because I wanted
with the owl as well.
I wanted elemental stuff really, because I felt like I was lacking it a little bit. But yeah, hers seems really cool, and just interesting vibe and weird characters. I agree with you in the sense that the towns feel better than before in terms of their identity. I still think this series has a fundamental problem with NPCs in that none of them have anything interesting to say at all. Right?
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah. One
of my favorite things about JRPGs, Dragon Quest in particular, and Dragon Quest does such a great job of this, is like every town has a like accent identity alongside the identity of what the town looks like, and every NPC will say something funny or curious or witty that you want to engage with. And so my ritual of Dragon Quest is every time I arrive at a town, I basically methodically go everywhere, and the other thing I think this game is missing is like going into houses and just finding things in cupboards or drawers or in pots and stuff. Like, it's something about RPGs that I really like, is just going into people's houses, picking through their shit and stealing stuff essentially, and this game doesn't really do that, which is a shame.
The equivalent they do is they want you to be using the thief ability with characters more, and like
totally
on NPCs, and like it's the equivalent essentially, but I guess I see what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. But it just means that like there's not really any incentive to quote unquote explore a town. The towns just feel flat from a identity perspective from characters, right? All the characters are just like they still are essentially tools for you to just harvest, basically, is what they are.
Yes.
And it's nice that you have the flavor text stuff if you interrogate them, like with Oswald's ability, where you can figure out who people are. But like, I don't want to do that to every character. Like, it's a whole process, and it feels like a bit annoying to go.
I didn't love the character. I think they're called path actions or something.
They're okay. Like, I think I most frequently will use Throne's steal, like you said,
right?
Or the follow abilities for the characters who have them. So Temenos,
you can get some very powerful stuff.
I'm sure
who you pick and the way you use it is there's some good stuff in there.
I'm sure there's a bunch of guides out there as well of like who are the best people to recruit, that type of thing. So I'll probably start looking that stuff up if things get tricky towards the end. But I mean, so far it's plain sailing, and I think the world is laid out in a more interesting way. And I don't know the order you went in, but I ended up having to go all the way over to where Partitio is. So like I did the first kind of 3, like Temenos and Oswald and Throne, and then I went over the ocean to Partitio and Agnia, and then I went down and got what's his name, the swordsman, completely blanking. Begins with an H, doesn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say Hateno, but that's a town.
No.
Hikari.
Hikari, that's it, Hikari. When it got him, and then went to Casti, and then finally over the ocean there to get Ochet. So I kind of went in a I started out going south, but then I went back round anti-clockwise to kind of get everybody. So and now I'm kind of getting everyone to that level, and then I'm going to start the chapter 2s, probably with Temenos' one in Cassie's town, which is I think where it is set. So I'm very interested to see how things pick up. I will say that a lot of them are, again, they're beginning parts of the story, and so they're not really the interesting meat of it yet.
8 beginning chapters, which is one of the weak points of the game.
Yeah, it's one of the bumps, but I think there's definitely a lot to go, and I think I'm 14 hours in now. So yeah, it feels like it's a meaty game, right? There's a lot of stuff in there. So I'll check in as I continue to go along with it. But yeah, I mean, it's a great game to play as like the first thing I'm really focusing on the OLED after Tears of the Kingdom.
Nice.
It's
so good to play in like chapter chunks. Like most chapters are not too long, especially those earlier ones, and like playing a chapter, it just feels like a very nice finite thing to do.
It's fulfilling, isn't it? Like you want to
really
have a gaming session where you feel like you make progress, and a game like this is really good for that because like you said, you can be in bed before you go to sleep and just be like, all right, I'll just do a chapter, it'll take me an hour and then I'll be done and that'll be great. And it's really good. So
glad you're enjoying it so far.
Absolutely. Bally, since last time where we decided to not rank The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, you have continued to play Tears of the Kingdom. I have also continued to play it, but I have also stopped because I rolled credits on Tears of the Kingdom and I finished it not long after we recorded that episode. So I landed about 115 hours. I think I did 105 shrines, so I still have quite a few more to go if I wanted to. A lot of stuff. I mean, the depths, I'm about 50% of the depth still, so I still have a lot of that to do. There's lots to go back to still, but I've wrapped it up, and I think what everyone said is pretty correct. Like, I think this game has a pretty great ending and some nice spectacle to it and some very cool stuff, and I think it wraps up really nicely and is a solid finale to a very long, very big game that I feel like I still, even though I have 115 hours and I've rolled credits, still feel like I have barely scratched the surface of Tears of the Kingdom. So
wow, barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, it's stupid. Like, my quest list is so long. Like, holy shit, the number of quests that I have, because I feel like most of the game I ran through and just I wasn't doing quests. I was just walking around the place and finding things and going off and doing whatever my kind of exploration sense wanted me to. And so it meant that I wasn't deliberately doing quest things, and so I didn't really run into stuff that I should be doing. So if I want to go back, I do have plenty of quests to do for all the different villages and all that sort of stuff, alongside continuing to finish all the shrines and all the light routes and everything that is still left to do. I think I only have 70 light routes, so I think there's probably, I don't know, I think there's probably 120, right? Because I think there's 120 shrines on the ground, and there are about 30 in the sky. Right. So yeah, there's still a bunch of places I still haven't explored. I'm sure there's some stuff I still haven't seen. And you asked me about a thing the other day, and I'm like, no idea what that does still. Finish the game, not a clue. But you, Bally, you're now 50 hours in, right?
I'm 50 hours in. I've now done 2 of the 4 dungeons or points of interest, I guess. Still having a very good time. I think I've barely done any more depths since we last spoke. I think I'm up to 52 shrines or something. Still having a great time. I think that where I've been really impressed is some of they are side quests, but like they're closest to mainline, arguably, where I've now got 2 of the great fairies, and I've started on, I think, the quest you described last time, where it's like what do you call it?
The reporter guy,
the
right?
reporter quest. And I think it just, because it has a knock-on effect of like starting lots of other side quests. And
yes, yeah.
I've done a couple of those, and they're some of the strongest like side quests I've ever seen in like between this game and Breath of the Wild, for sure. Like, really, I mean,
they label
stuff.
them as side adventures, right? So they know that they are a bigger deal.
Totally. And if I was gonna have one criticism of them, for a game that is so keen on getting you to start like and go in any direction, and like you can play this game in any order, like it's a bit of a shame that with those quests that you have to go to the reporting place, like in that
there's
one
like one
spot
specific
outside
place to
Rito,
do it,
just to start that chain reaction. And maybe that's one regret I have, is that I wish I'd started Rito and then gone Goron, whereas I went Goron then Rito, and I was a lot less powerful for the first quarter of my playtime, arguably. But equally, it's fine in the end. But say I did Rito 4th, I think that would have felt like a real kick in the nuts to like get to that point, being so powerful, and then having not experienced all those amazing side quests that link to all of the stables. So like,
right, because you would have explored the world, been to every stable, but then you get this quest that requires you to go back to every stable,
right,
essentially. So it feels more natural to get that quest early, and then every stable you come across, you're like, oh well, this is exciting, because not only is it a new stable, I can register and get pony points, but now I can also go and do the quest with what's his name, Pelika or something, I don't know, I can't remember.
Right, the Pelican, yeah. So it's just like, there could have just been some smarter design where arguably that quest should have maybe had 4 starting points, a bit like the 4 fairies or something, like just something that made it a little more applicable to regardless of where you start in the map, because it seems like such a crucial part of like the side quests in this game and stuff.
Sure, I mean, you could say the same thing about the bubble gems, which I found at probably about 80 hours into my playthrough. I found the little monster boys who do the bubble gem stuff, and up to that point I had, I don't know, 30 accumulated in my exploring of caves, and you know, eventually I found them, but it would have been nice to find those guys earlier, you know?
Yeah, so maybe these things could just be a bit more randomized and can start in multiple places. I don't know, but I'm still having an incredible time. I think that it's yes, I'm still struggling with kind of the overworld is not surprising, and that is frustrating. But the side quests are so interesting, and I'm enjoying them so much that like I'm still just absolutely loving this game. I'm still loving the shrines. Done a bit more sky stuff. That's been really cool. I thought the Rito dungeon and everything was a really nice build up. Really great boss. Really, the dungeon was good fun. Like, and it wasn't too tricky a dungeon either. But like, just
did
really...
you use kind of like the icicle stuff with? Like, there was a puzzle where you have the 2 gears rotating around, and like I loved using the icicle thing there. There's also a chest that you can find where it's behind bars, and there's a little tiny hole to get through, and like the way that I got through that hole was so jank and ridiculous, it was insane. I basically like used a thing, I think I used like a shield on the other side of 2 icicles to hang it over that little hole, and then walked Link up slowly on the 2 icicles hung by the shield, and then crouched into the hole to get to that chest. There was some real creativity that I had through that dungeon. I think partly because it was the first one I did, and so I didn't have as many options to do stuff, but yeah, I think that I was really impressed by that one to begin with, because it did have a lot. It felt like natural creativity where you'd like shoot the icicle from the ceiling and you're like, oh, this is a stick I can use. And then also like making it the right size by like, I had a fire rod on my back, so I was like moving close to it and it would start shrinking. I'd be like, oh shit, I need to get rid of my fire rod, because otherwise I won't have this to use and it won't be long enough. So yeah, lots of fun interactions in that one.
Yeah, I never did that chest actually. I saw the hole, I was like, this seems a little beyond where like the effort I'm willing to put in right in this moment. I think I'm just gonna pass.
Which I think is one of the problems of this game, honestly, is like the rewards are just not very good, right? Like when you see a chest,
like an opal.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Cool, I've got 20 of those. Great.
That's great. Yeah, like, or it will be a sword that I can't carry because I already have too many swords, or a shield, or a bow that and it's weaker than what I have. Like, that is the real downfall, I think, of this experience, in that it's far more fun to figure out a solution to get to a chest, and then what you get in the chest is like, there's nothing that it could validate that effort to get there, right? And I wish they found a way around that. And I think it's part of the problem with the stuff you find underground as well, where like all the treasure markers you find lead to, well, it's a piece of clothing from like one of the previous games, and cool, like I guess that's fun, but when you know it's going to be that every time, it's like it takes away the wonder of exploration. I think there's just a lack of unique rewards for cool stuff that you go and do, basically. There was a whole massive side quest that was one of the coolest ones in the game, like really involved, and just took a bunch of exploring above and below and like this entire area, and at the end of it they were like, oh, here's an extra heart, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I did all that, like almost 3 hours of this entire sequence, and it was really fun to do, and it's so great to work it out. They're like, no, here's 1 heart. I'm like, fuck off, game. Like, I really wanted them to invest in rewards for cool things that you do, because if you spend that much time doing something, then the game's like, oh, it's just another one of the things that you already have. Yeah. It's like, it just feels deflating, you know?
Maybe that's a downside to breakable items, because one of the best things to receive in a game like Elden Ring is a really cool weapon. Yes, now, the downside with Elden Ring is you can equip your character in a way where the weapon you gain might be completely pointless because you've tooled them in the opposite direction.
Or you just don't use magic, and then you get a bunch of spells.
Exactly. But when you find a weapon in Elden Ring that matches your build, that you've done some weird side quest to achieve or found it in a peculiar place, you're like, yes, this feels amazing. And you definitely don't get that from chess in the same way in Tears of the Kingdom.
Or you find something in that game that you're like, it's so cool, I'm going to respec my build, I'm going to change it, you know?
Exactly, totally.
So
yeah, I'm still doing stuff around the Rito area because the blizzard has now cleared, so I can do stuff around there, and that's exciting. I think I'm going to just go back over areas of the map I've already been. I might go into the depths and then try and do some like shrine mapping and find a few light routes. Try to find some more cool stuff in the depths. I've got a handful of treasure maps that point to places in the depths I should go to. That'd be good. And then I think I'm going to work my way east and think about going towards like the Zora area and probably try and maybe do that dungeon for next time. I don't know how long everything I'm describing will take. It'll probably take me like 30 hours, so I won't get there. But
totally,
that's my general aim, and I'm happy just ticking along at the pace I'm going. I think by the time I finish, I'll be well onto like 150, 160 hours, and I personally want to defeat the final boss and then not come back to the game. Like, I think that's
fair. Yeah,
I'd prefer to do that. I know a few others people are doing that as well, and
I did that with Breath of the Wild. I remember, like, I went and got all the shrines before I finished it. With this one, I think it's just so intimidating. It's just way too big. That's the problem. Like, it was way too big for me to have to, because I knew it would take me 180 hours, and I just don't want to do that right now. I'd rather finish it and then come back and chip away at it.
Totally.
And the other thing, I think, if I'm really honest, and I feel very disconnected from the conversation around this, I think the shrines in this game are incredibly underwhelming. Like, I find them, and maybe it's just because I've watched some people do some puzzles on Twitch streams. Like, I watched Jeff Backlar and his kids do some puzzles, and like him and his kids trying to do one of the sign puzzles. I'm like, are you like? Obviously, his kid is a kid, so his kid's not going to know what to do. But Backlar is a fully grown adult. I'm like, how have you not figured out? Like, it is so easy.
What do you mean one of the sign puzzles?
Like Addison holding the sign.
Oh, got you. Sorry.
Yeah, like just propping that up, and like it takes them like 20 minutes to do this. I'm like, what is wrong? like, am I just like, I don't know. I feel like maybe my level of puzzle is it feels like a lot of these shrines they present you with an option. They're like, this is basically how you solve it, and then you just kind of do it. And I've seen so much praise for the shrines. I think they are super underwhelming. I find them so easy and have barely had to use any brain power to solve any of them. And there's some creativity in there, but honestly, like, I can count on two hands the number of shrines that I left and was like, that was cool, I enjoyed that. Like, for most part, I thought the shrines were worse than Breath of the Wild, and I think part of it is that you have such a wide tool set, and you just can do so many things that it feels like there's no interesting solution that makes you feel smart for having done it, because it's like, oh well, yeah, I can just do this thing because I can, and I don't know how to reconcile that. I've not got any joy out of it, and I think part of it is also it doesn't go far enough. Like, they will start to develop a cool idea, and then the shrine will just end. And I'm like, well, you could have done a third part to this to make it even more complex and interesting, and that's where the real resolution and fun would come from.
Yeah.
But it feels like they're all these two-step puzzles. They get to the second step that starts to develop an interesting idea, and then never goes further. And it's like, now you're done.
Two-step feels strange for Nintendo. You're right, because
it feels really off. Yeah.
So many of the shrines are them actually teaching you something you can do with the Ultra Hand moves. So,
yes,
for example, everyone was going wild on Twitter, like, did you know you can put a rocket to a shield and use the shield to... It's like, well, there's a shrine that actually teaches you that, and it's actually in the Rito area, so most people who have played, I don't know, 20, 30 hours will definitely have seen that. And I agree with you completely with the idea that a shrine that's showing you how to use, like, a rocket shield should teach you how to use the rocket shield, challenge you with the rocket shield, and then challenge you in a different way with the rocket shield, and then you get your reward. So you've learned something new about Ultra Hand. You've mastered it in a way because they've, like Mario Brothers, they do the jump over the gap, and initially there's no gap, and then they take out the gap, and all of a sudden you that's like learning through gameplay. And
exactly,
it does that, but it doesn't do it to the nth degree where you just want that third stage, like you say. And I think it's cool that the shrines are teaching you uses of Ultra Hand that you otherwise wouldn't work out, because I don't think most 99% of players are never going to work out that you can attach a rocket to a shield and just suddenly rocket up in the air. Now, there's going to be some players that do that before they get to the shrine or see something on Twitter, but I wouldn't put myself in that category for the vast majority of items. So, like, I think that it's nice that those shrines are there, but I agree it makes them a lot less challenging, and they just need that. You can do the tutorial shrines but still make them challenging by adding just other layers to those shrines. And for the most part, that's not there. I think you're right. Although I think I've been really enjoying the shrines generally, and I don't really mind how easy they are, because there's a hell of a lot of other challenging things in the game, especially like some bulky enemies and things here and there. So I don't know. Overall, I'm liking the shrines a lot. I might side with you slightly on the whole. I think Breath of the Wild shrines are maybe stronger. I think especially the DLC shrines were incredibly strong, I thought, with Breath of the Wild. I don't know if you remember those, but yeah.
I think the dungeon I remember being very good. I can't remember the shrines that well, but yeah, potentially that's correct.
I seem to remember a lot of like Gerudo style electricity focused shrines, about like loads of connecting circuits and things, and it's kind of like the most Tears of the Kingdom feeling aspects of Breath of the Wild, arguably, like all that circuitry stuff with the electricity. And yeah, I've not seen a ton of that so far in this game. There's been some cool stuff, but I need slightly more of it, and I'm only 50 shrines in, and who knows, maybe the shrines you haven't done yet, MBZ, are like some of the best, but we'll see. They
could be, totally, yeah, and I still have 50 that I have yet to do, and you know, they're still like enjoyable to go through and finish, but like I never come out of them with a sense of satisfaction that I'm like, oh, and I think it's partially like, for me, puzzles are such a core part of the identity of Zelda, and so I think that not hitting for me has not like put it down in my estimation, but it's like, oh god, I really wish that these were a bit better. But I don't know, seeing as the way other people on Twitter and places have been reacting to it, I feel like a general kind of mainstream player, or people, you see, there's lots of people who play Zelda who don't tend to play a lot of other Nintendo games, right? They jump in because it's the big Nintendo thing, and so a lot of other games don't do puzzles in the way that Nintendo do, and it feels like their like tolerance or their level of puzzle solving is just a little bit below where we are, like, as Nintendo people, and so totally. I wonder if that is a bit of a thing that I'm seeing as a side effect.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I'm going to stick with my strategy of now moving on to Zora after Rito, and like I said, trying to do all 150 shrines before fighting the final boss. But there's totally every chance that come 80 shrines in, I'm like, right, I'm done with this game for now. I'd rather beat the boss now. But as things stand, I'm keen to just meticulously comb my way through the world and go that way. But we'll see.
Yeah, sure, you'll find some cool stuff. There's lots of cool stuff out there. So yeah, we'll continue to talk about this game, I'm sure, for a long time. Yeah, Legend of Zelda, it's a thing, here to stay. And that, I think, is going to bring us to the end of the show. Thanks, everybody, of course, for listening, for sticking with us. We are going to plug some things, some stuff, and then get on out of here. So, Bally, we have a little thing on a website called patreon.com, and if you go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, you can support this podcast monetarily if you so wish, and you can get some stuff back in return, such as bonus podcasts. And Bally would like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer, UK Alan, and Turtle. Thank you for your support, but thank you to all of our other patrons. We hugely appreciate the support you give the show.
Absolutely. You can obviously find us on the internet. We are on Twitter at TNL Podcast. You can go there to find links to our Discord and our YouTube channel, both places that you can go to find the show in its various forms. And Discord's obviously a great community, a good place to jump in and chat with some people about the show. But you can also find us on Twitter if you still haven't reached your limit for the day. So you can find me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Yeah, if anyone has any Blue Sky invites, just throw them our way. It'll be cool.
I really want to move. I really want to jump ship. Let's do it. Like, give me some website. I'll do it. Yeah, we'll do it. It's going to happen at some point. But that's going to happen eventually. Right now, what you could do is you could write into the show if you so wished. And Bally, we didn't take any emails this week, but we will be next time. So where can people send those fine emails to? Please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Excellent. So please send in a message. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear from you and talk about everything
thought that you have in your head delivered to us via digital form. Obviously, you can find the show in various places. We're on Stitcher, we are on Spotify. You can download us. You can go and rate us as well on those platforms. You can go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review rating. You can go to Spotify and leave us a rating as well. That's always highly appreciated. And if you want to support the show in any way that isn't via Patreon, that is the best way to do it, is to go over there and review us. Always just helps us get a bit more visibility to people on the internet who might want to find a show like this one where you talk about Nintendo. And I think that is going to do it for us. Bali, how are you feeling about finishing any game before Pikmin comes out? Is there any possibility going on here?
Oh god, my aim is to finish Jedi Survivor before Pikmin 4 comes out on the 21st of July. And if I finish, I was going to say Pikmin Survivor. Wouldn't that be a great game
Survivor.
name?
Now I'm just thinking
Survivor.
of Vampire Survivors, but Pikmin, and you have Pikmin just following you around. Oh man, this is a great idea. Nintendo need to make a Vampire Survivors knockoff with Pikmin. It'll be great.
There we go. But I might try and jump back into Advance Wars Reboot Camp and play that second game, or at least start it ahead of Pikmin coming out.
Oh, nice, yeah.
We'll see. That's my gaming slate. But yeah, I mean, Pikmin's coming out 21st, and then our next main episode 252, is going to come out on the 17th. I've got it.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to be a bit ahead of Pikmin, so
that's good. That means we have some time to play it before we chat about it.
So I might try and get a bit more Tears of the Kingdom in before then as well. Get onto that Zora area.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, thank you everybody for listening. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more podcasts and some more Nintendo video games and some more stuff. Until then, thanks so much, folks, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.